The following video is based upon true crime content. Therefore, it may contain images and/or language that some find disturbing. For this reason, viewer discretion is advised. Good morning, family. How are y'all? Good morning, chat. Good morning, lurkers. I'm a little early. I know. I came on early because I thought it would be a good idea to just kind of start slowly. Barbara Schultz, where have you been, girlfriend? We've missed you. We've missed you, honey. You guys, Barbara's OG from back in the day. She's not a big chatter, but she always says hello. Working and lurking. I know, me too. That's what I do when I'm watching. So I get it. If you lurk and you don't chat on my chat, you're not up there. Don't worry. Don't feel bad. Don't, that's what I do. Nobody knows I lurk. Mark says, I don't dare be late. Oh, you cannot be tardy. Oh, honey, you had a rough year. I'm so sorry. Maybe this year will get better. New Hampshire. Annette. Praying my head off this kid gets life, right? No, I didn't do Natalie Cochran's. But you know what I was wanting to kind of look at? I said I wasn't going to do it. Damn it. Megan Boswell. Her trial starts this week. But there's a baby involved, you guys. I hate doing trials with any type of child. Let me look. There was something else we were going to look at. I got to check my notes. One moment, please. She's terrible. I don't know anything about her. I'm going to be honest. I don't. If I was going to do another one, I wanted to do the celebrity hairstylist one. That's not the socialite, is it? I'm trying to keep up with what's going on with Corey Richins because we were supposed to hear back from the judge at this point this week. And then Thursday, we've got Robert Cremo hearing happening. I'm already set up to stream that one for you guys. So that's Thursday at 11 a.m. my time, I believe. So I got to get that. Once we get done with this trial, I got to get that link up. And then we've also got Swan Boat Club hearings coming up. And we got to get ready for this Lori Vallow thing. I don't know, though, because if I had a choice between doing Lori Vallow and Robert Cremo III, I think I'd do Robert Cremo III. He's the one that it was the 4th of July attacker. Remember, we worked on his stuff. His dad was arrested. It's been a while since I did anything on his case, but we've kind of stayed. We'll have to do like a catch up on that one. I've got to read about Natalie Is she's the one that is on? She's on there right now, isn't she? Or did they just finish her trial? That's sometimes what I'll do is I'll go back if I hear that they're really, really good trials. I will go back like later on and then, revisit them, but they just finished it. Okay. Is she evil? Is she evil? I do love evil women, though. Y'all know that. I love covering evil women. My sister sent.
I've got an idea.
Oh my God. My sister sent me a video message about moving the furniture on the deck again. She's obsessed with keeping. My sister is obsessed with moving furniture. I've decided. Doing the United Healthcare case if possible. Will we be doing that one? I think we're gonna have to, right? I think we're gonna have to. But I don't know have any clue when it's even coming up. And I have not been doing a whole lot on it. Shelley loves the Deadly Women series. I know, right? Mark, evil women are the best. That's why he's always here every day with us. He loves us evil women. I don't know what it is about the evil women. Oh, Mark's been looking in the chat from. Oh, so you saw Fridays, Mark, when you weren't here? All right. Well, I'll check into it. Gentlemen prefer blogs. Y'all know what I started watching last night while I was going to sleep was the Scamanda. It's new on Hulu. It's about some girl that was in California that scammed a bunch of people saying that another one of those that scammed people telling everybody that she had cancer. I fell asleep before it got good, so I don't know. I know we got a Courtney Clooney's case is like priority right now on this channel, and and then everything kind of falls into place after. But Courtney's case, I kept thinking we were going to probably hear about a dates being set at this point, and we haven't. And that just kind of makes me think that we could be looking truly at mid to late summer, which gives us time to kind of. I guess that's why I started doing more other cases. And then when I saw that they were streaming this one, I was like, oh yeah, we've been listening and following in on this one from the beginning, so we had to do this Collin case. I did last night. I put together a overview of the last 4 days of trial into like I narrowed it down to like 3 hours, and so I've got that posted. Well, I'm gonna upload it and post it. It's uploaded. I just got to post it as soon as we go into jury deliberations. I'm still drinking my coffee. I need more coffee. Don't put my Mark in timeout no more. I think he's had enough of punishment this week. He's been good this week. I've got and you're a new member? I thought you were already a member. Well, welcome in, my dearest. My dearest. You missed Grandpa's testimony. Okay, well, I've time stamped everything, Patty. So if you go in, hang on, let me tell you when Grandpa was. I think he was day 2. Whatever day you missed. Looking at my notes. I think it was day 2. Or was it day 3? Oh, I can't see very well today. It was day 3. Grandpa testified. So you could just go back and look at the timestamps and watch that. So yeah, I put his testimony and I put Mom's testimony in that. That's kind of why my trial recap is so long, because I really didn't want to miss up too much of either one of their testimony, except for grandmother towards the end. I mean, she was getting a little bit repetitive. She might as well have just got stood up and said, "Please don't send them to jail. It was my daughter's fault." You know. Carolyn. Yeah. Well, I mean, the defense attorneys are doing their job. would be awesome if that was the case, Mark. Damn it, Margaret. You just want to you just want a reason to say damn it, Margaret on a daily basis. Blanco, good morning, my friend. You changed your avatar. Hi, Halle Belly. Shelly, I couldn't either. I couldn't be a defense attorney. It seems that they're starting a little late today. Let me refresh real quick, you guys. No, they've got it scheduled to start right at 7:30. Oh, Mark, bless your heart. You're so sweet. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. You helped me. Thank you so much. Special timeout fund. Well, we got to take care of the timeout room, and all of your super chats help us do that. Eventually, one day, we'll get like a whole wet bar installed in there for y'all, and get your little mini fridge with sodas, water, whatever you want. Then it's not really timeout, is it? What's the point? You think Kathy's mom was on the spectrum, Liddy-bug? Well, you know what's crazy about that? If you watch that video, did we ever watch that again? I don't know if we did. If you watch that body cam footage with her in it, she didn't come across that way. She was different acting. Like, I think that's why I'm glad they saw that body cam, because they could tell that she was different from the body cam. Let me find it real quick. I can play it until they come up. Hang on. Shoot, I forget where I have it. Let me see if this is it. Hi, everyone. Yeah, here it is. The term.
Deputy Jankowski.
Now body camera footage from the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, that's where Collin lived with his mother, Charlotte County, Florida, is giving us a look at the domestic.
If the court comes on, I'm going to switch back over. Okay, guys?
Domestic violence incident from November of 2023, where Collin was accused of beating up Kathy Griffith. He told deputies his side of the story when they arrived.
I got off the phone with Rentis, we sat down and we ate, and she started talking to me about how a bunch of really bad shit. And then when I got up and was like, you can't just do that, and she was telling me to shut up, she hit me in the face, and then I reacted like this. She grabbed onto me, I hit her in the stomach, and then I'm a wrestler. It was just reactive. Grabbed her. She got to the ground. I grabbed the phone. I started recording, and then I left. Okay, that's it.
So she hit you in the face?
Yeah.
But we've been through this. You called Rentis because you kind of messed up, right?
No, it's because I didn't know who else to call, and I knew that, and I wanted to make sure he knew first off.
Okay.
Deputies put Collin in cuffs in the back of a cruiser and then talked to his mom, Kathy.
It's Catherine A. Griffith, right? And then 9485.
Yes.
Okay. So I heard EMS is coming to check out your hand. Okay. Let me
right here because he kicked me.
Okay. Hey, can I see your hand? Okay.
He kicked the phone out of my hand as I was trying to record it. I was on the ground.
Medics then checked out Kathy Griffith's injuries.
It hurts. I mean, you can see how swollen my knuckles are. It's okay. He literally stomped on my hand to get the phone out of my hand.
Let me see the inside of your hand. All right. Do you have any pain to your wrist at all, or is it just right here in the top of your hand?
No, it's about
all of this.
Yeah, from here till about here.
Okay. When did that happen?
When he attacked me.
Was that like a couple minutes ago? An hour ago?
Like in the past 20, 30 minutes. And then he takes me here. I have like some redness.
Collin did not want to come back home.
Okay.
And I said, you don't have a choice. You have to go back home.
This is grandmother, you guys. It looks like she has lighter hair at this one.
And he said, no, I want foster care. And even the corporal was saying, foster care isn't going to be good for you. You don't have issues. You have to work on them. And so we agreed. I talked to him all the way. Oh, my car doors. Oh.
Collin has mental health issues, according to his grandma. He was in therapy and had a treatment plan, and there was some sort of intervention going on with law enforcement as well.
We talked all the way down, and I said, you have got to learn to get your anger under control. You want to be a Marine. People are going to get it. I'm retired from the service. I said,
So am I.
Very good. So I said, people are going to get in your face, and you're going to have to learn to deal with that. You just ignore it.
Right.
And I said, the other thing, too, is you don't ever hit anybody. You don't even touch somebody. And especially somebody as small as Kathy. That is just something that you cannot ever do. I said, that needs to be. He goes, no, but I said, there are no buts. That's all there is. So we got here. And Princess had agreed. She's going to lay the law down. You know, that she is the parent. She is doing.
Grandmother's demeanor was different. Yeah. Can you tell? Can you see it? How weird she was acting yesterday compared to what she is here? Jury saw that. The jury can rewatch all of this too in deliberation.
What she thinks is best for him. That he's not going to have his cellular phone. He's not going to have access because he's like talking to some person on online that we don't even know who this person is.
Okay.
And that she said, I don't want you ever calling me a psychopathic narcissist anymore. I said, and he goes, no, I didn't. He goes, no, I heard you say that. So,
okay.
He just, he had said that in the past. And she said, let me lay this out for you, because the only thing I think you really care about is money. So anytime there's an infraction, I'm going to take that from you. And
anything you ever care about is money. And that came up because I bet of him wanting to use the funds from his father's estate.
Add up. So you have got to fly right, because otherwise, if not, and then he was doing something with his eyes. I think he wanted the phone, and that's all he was concerned about, was getting
His phone back.
His phone.
So was he upset about getting his phone back, or upset about not going on the cruise and going to get evaluated?
I think both.
Both? Okay.
Yeah.
And was she trying to record him with his own phone, or
Two phones were involved.
There was two phones.
So there was his and hers? Okay.
So she, just to kind of clarify, he's like, let's just do it. Got her phone to start recording. You said next thing you know, they're on the ground. Did you see how they got on the ground?
No.
Okay.
No. Because I was trying to call also.
Okay.
So, but I was very worried she was on the ground, and I went in between them. You've got to get your anger under control, okay? I'm saying prayers for you all the time, Collin. I love you.
Mama, I think my anger's fine. It's just that when someone attacks me, I don't know.
What? I can't hear you. What?
No.
Do you think your anger's fine?
Yes, it's just when someone attacks me, that's how I act.
That didn't happen, though. I was there. I saw it. I saw you stand up. And I said, sit down, and you wouldn't. And you went after the phone. And the next thing I know, she's on the floor. And I'm trying to get in between you all, and I'm trying to call Rennis.
No. She hit me. She grabbed onto me. I beat her, and then I got her to the ground, and then wrestling move, and then I ran.
I didn't see that, Collin. I really didn't. All I saw was you on the ground, or her on the ground, and you by her. And you guys fighting for the phone. So how did she get on the ground?
Because I moved her on the ground. I rested her on the ground and she got on me.
Why did you stand up? And why did you say?
So we're just trying to have a face-to-face conversation.
No, you didn't. You stood up and said, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Yes, you did. I was there.
I was saying, Mom, I'm not a psychopath. I'm not this murderer. I'm just trying to peacefully leave or peacefully coexist and just figure something out. And she kept telling me to shut up and shut up. And when I wouldn't shut up, she hit me.
No, that's not what happened, Collin. That's not what happened. You never said you wanted to peacefully coexist.
I've been saying that.
You said that in the car, but not there with her.
The next day, deputies were back at the house with his.
So basically, Grandma just shot herself in the foot, I think. Her testimony's out the door. If it wasn't out the door from the way she was acting when she was on the stand, if they look at this and revisit it and go and then compare her demeanor, they're going to be like, yeah, no.
His mom after Collin had been released from jail.
Collin, right? Yes, sir.
So what's going on, man?
Last night, me and my mom went to a physical altercation. I got arrested for domestic battery, but going in front of a judge today, I have a right to a public defender, and we'll see how that goes.
Okay. So how is the situation with you and mom right now? Have things calmed down? Are you guys able to get along? Where are we at?
No, sir. It's not good. She thinks that I beat the shit out of her. I don't. She thinks that I'm like psychotic, like literally psychopath, sociopath, something like that. I don't know exactly where she's at. She thinks I'm going to kill her. I want to kill her. Or that I want to beat the shit out of her.
Do you?
No, sir.
Okay.
I don't want to hurt anyone, let alone my mom, even despite this happening, but I'm not going to take what I consider abuse when someone's attacking me. And
how is she attacking you? What
when she attacked me. When she threw a punch at me and grabbed on me, I grabbed on her back. I got her off of me, she hit the ground, and then I fled and called Rentis, and then he sent someone out.
You called who?
Rentis, Detective Rentis.
Okay.
The deputies then questioned Collin about statements he made at the jail.
Did you make any statements saying that you were going to kill your mom if you got in the car with her?
No, sir.
I'm trying to figure out why we would have a corporal at the jail that took you out, that dropped you off with your mom and telling us that you said, don't put me in the car with her, I'm going to kill her.
Yeah,
was that said?
I did not say I was going to kill her. I did not say kill. I don't know why he sent me back here. I asked him not to, but he said he didn't like my attitude and that I had to just work on it, and he sent me back here. But his words, not mine.
Okay. Well, we're just trying to figure out, we just want to make sure we do everything we can to prevent anything happening.
Sir, given...
Sorry, court's on. Oh, good. They just went in with the audio. Perfect timing.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back again. My humblest thanks for your continued service in this case. As I mentioned yesterday, I'm sorry, was there an issue, Miss Samaro? Oh, nope. Notepads? Are there notepads not in the chairs?
Oh, I suppose she walked out with this.
Okay.
I know, Patrick. I agree. That like it's just a something that happens every day now. I guess it does.
All right.
I don't know.
As I mentioned at the end of the day yesterday, both the state and the defendant have rested their cases. The attorneys will now have the opportunity, if they wish, to make a closing argument. Please remember that what the attorneys say is not evidence, nor is it your instruction on the law. However, do pay close attention to what they have to say. Their arguments are intended to aid you in understanding this case. Each side will have equal opportunity, but the state is entitled to divide its argument between an opening and a rebuttal after the defendant has given a closing argument. Does the state wish to give a closing argument?
I do, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen, the brutality and the carnage that Collin Griffith unloaded on his mom on September 8th of 2024 is as real as it gets. First, I'd like to thank you for not only being here, but for your attention. When you came to jury selection, you had no idea what type of case you might encounter. Would it be a petty theft, a DUI? But what you ultimately heard and sat on was a first-degree murder case with a second count of kidnapping. So to hear and see what you had to go through is not something that jurors see every day, and most certainly most people never think about or see. But you've heard and seen the evidence, and later this morning and into the afternoon, you will be doing what you came here to do. And that is to dispense the ultimate form of justice. Not because I'm asking you to do this or suggesting you do this, but based upon the facts and the evidence, the defendant sits there, a guilty person who stabbed his own mother in the neck and then watched her bleed out in front of him. The lady that brought him into this world here on earth, he took out of this world and this earth. But see, at the end of this, he has to watch you come back through those doors. And he has to stand and he has to listen to the verdict. And that verdict is out of my control. It's out of their control. It is 100% in your control. And I have faith and confidence based upon what you heard and saw that you will do the right thing and you will hold him accountable for the fury he unleashed on his mom. Because the cold hard facts and the reality is quite unthinkable when you really think about it. The reality of what that person did to his mom is a second-by-second nightmare for her. She left this world knowing that the person that took her out was the son that she gave everything to. When you're in the quietness and the privacy of the jury room, I want you to take a close look at that knife. And remember, each inch that knife went flying through Kathy Griffith's neck, through each part of her human anatomy that Dr. Graveran described. Because the reality of it, there isn't just a defendant and a victim and this happened and that happened, but the reality of it, for what the defendants accomplished, which is exactly what he wanted to do for so long. The writing was on the wall, ladies and gentlemen. The writing was on the wall. The defendant knew what he wanted to do, and it was just a matter of time. Why? Why did he have such deep-seated hatred for his mom? The lady that was just concerned about him making it to Domino's to work his 4 o'clock shift on Sunday. That's all that she wanted. They can say whatever they want about Kathy Griffith. It's all right. I'm not afraid. You shouldn't be afraid either. Because on Sunday, September 8th, Kathy Griffith did no harm, meant no harm to her son, Collin Griffith. She had one objective only that cost her her life. And I don't know if it's sad or if it's admirable, but she knew and was willing to die and knew she would die at the hands of her son just to spend some more time with him. We heard from Detective Lacey Zenoniani that Kathy Griffith literally said she knew she would die, but as long as it meant that she could spend some more time with her son, it was worth it to her. And what thanks did Kathy Griffith get from her son? What thanks did she get? She got a foot-long butcher knife rammed into her neck. And you heard the pathway of destruction. Feeling everything through her neck, through those neck muscles, through the esophagus, through the trachea, through the cartilage, and on and on and on, as it ripped through her neck, and the shock and pain going through her body as the defendant was happy. As he followed through with what he said he would do. If nothing else, he's a man of his word. He said he would kill his mom, and he took her out. But you know what? Now he's in a court of law. Now he has to suffer whatever comes his way in the form of a verdict. And that verdict is guilty. That's guilty for what he did to his mom. As she's on the floor trying to get up, but she can't get up. She's got a gaping open wound in her neck, compliments of her son. Thanks, Collin Griffith. Appreciate that. Kathy, who was literally dusting off his domino shoes, doing us laundry, buying him Starbucks, taking him to the movies, buying him things, getting him a phone, a computer. Now, yes, these are things that you would hope a mom would do, but not all moms do that. Whatever issues Kathy had, she didn't lack for love of her son. She wasn't there to do him harm on September 8th. Her motives were quite simple. Her motives were for Collin Griffith to return to her household by 10 a.m. Sunday. That's all she wanted. She wanted her son, who she was dusting off his domino shoes and making sure that he had a clean uniform, to be home in time to go to work. That's all she wanted. The clock was ticking. Once he turned 18, she knew he was gone. He wanted nothing to do with her. He had told her flat out he wanted to kill her. He had attacked her before. He had already killed somebody in Oklahoma. And she knew what was going to happen to her. But despite that, all that she wanted was every single minute she could have with her son. Well, she got to spend the last seconds of her life with her son as he watched on, as she gushed blood out of her open, gaping wound. The death was not instantaneous. She bled internally. She bled externally. She was fighting to get up. You see her arm finally comes underneath the island. And there comes a certain point, ladies and gentlemen, where that last drop of blood came out of her, where she took her last breath and she died and left this earth knowing that her son butchered her. And that's the reality of it. You take a look at that knife and you'll know what it went through, who it went through, who was holding it, what their intention was, and what they wanted to do. Operation Kill Mom accomplished. That's exactly what Collin Griffith did. There's a little PowerPoint here for some things to look at, for you to remember when you deliberate. September 8th, 2024, Kathy Griffith was murdered by Collin Griffith. That's as simple as it gets. But going back the year earlier, the first person the defendant killed before he killed Kathy Griffith, he killed that person when he shot that person 2 times with a handgun, once in the chest and once in the head. Now, you'll remember the importance of that as we continue on. You'll recall when they downloaded the defendant's phone and they saw something on September 8th that Kathy texted Collin. Now, Collin Griffith didn't need a reason or an excuse to be mad at his mom. You've heard through so many witnesses, law enforcement, countless witnesses, that the defendant explicitly verbalized that he would kill his mom. Not only that, but he thought about different ways to accomplish that. And a reoccurring theme was that he would stab her. You don't have to guess what he was thinking or what he wanted to do. You heard from multiple law enforcement officers the defendant's statements about that he would kill his mom. And when they asked how, he gave a plethora of ways, including throwing her out of a car, shooting her, but stabbing her was a reoccurring theme. For whatever reason, the defendant got off on that. And you will recall that the defendant's anger towards his mom, it was already over brimming. But his anger was just intensified when on Sunday, September 8th, the last day of Kathy's life, she wrote the following to Collin. Mind you, her only intention, despite all these threats that she didn't want to have to carry through with, was to get the defendant home. That's it. But she wrote to him, Collin, the recordings of you admitting to killing, and then she wrote the person's name, and planning the murder, there are 4 different instances from my Ring camera, are all going to Bob, Susie, Amanda, and Chris at 3 p.m. today. Plus the recovered audio from Chuck's iCloud, where you told your dad you hated me and I was an evil bitch, are being sent too. Let's stop for a minute. The defendant called and thinks his mom was an evil bitch. That has just so much malice and hatred, once again, to the lady that was trying to do everything she could. I mean, God, we saw Ring videos. She's cleaning all the time. She's doing laundry. She makes sure that his house is stocked with food. She has clean clothes for him. He has his own room. He has his own Xbox, computers, cell phone. She's giving him the credit card to go to Starbucks to buy sandwiches and drinks, taking him to the movies, anything and everything to make him happy. And you know what kind of thanks she got. Thanks to Collin Griffith, stand-up guy that he is. And then what did she expect from him? Did she expect for him to be remodeling the house or doing all this work? No. She wanted minimal things. She wanted respect as any mother deserved. She wanted the defendant to pick up a damn finger and do some chores, to weed whack the backyard. Was it 10 acres of property that she wanted him to go outside in the 90-degree weather and push a lawnmower? No. It was a nice, modest backyard that she wanted the defendant to take care of some business, like the man he was supposed to turn into. But if it interfered, God forbid, with him playing video games or him taking his walk, then piss on his mom. That was his attitude. It's 100% his attitude. He didn't want to be bothered. She wanted him to put up a bookshelf. The defendant didn't want to do it. She wanted him to clean up the room because there were a bunch of ants and cockroaches that were crawling around Collin Griffith's candy bags, but it might interfere with him getting some fresh air. So he just blew her off. Day after day, time after time, the defendant wanted to do nothing but what he wanted to do. And you know what? Life would go on if that was the worst of his ways. But he also had that hatred. So every time his mom would ask him to do something reasonable, that hatred would brim. He has told you what he thinks of his mom, that she is an evil bitch. This is what he's saying about his own mom who brought him into this world, his own flesh and blood, and that's what he thinks of her.
Thank you, Miss Mandy.
Kathy continues on. My dad is sending me his recordings of you telling him how you planned my murder back in February. Audio, video, email, texts, and phone records are all being sent. So we continue on with the PowerPoint. This is the last day of Kathy Griffith's life. The defendant's life would go on, but Kathy Griffith would cease to exist here on this earth. And there she is on Sunday, unsuspecting the violence that would be coming her way from her son. It should have been just another Sunday afternoon. Should she have not gone over there? Should Collin have gone somewhere else? You know, these questions really don't matter because the reality is what happened. She said there are two things that are going to happen. He's either going to come home with me or he can follow in his own car. She didn't say, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to smoke him. I'm going to beat his ass. I'm going to stab him. I'm going to shoot him. I'm going to do any of that stuff. She wanted to go over there and bring him back. She didn't even want to have to go drive 2.5 hours over there. It would have been real simple if the defendant just came home. But once again, that's beside the point because the reality is he didn't come home. He didn't want to come home. That's the way life is sometimes. But she wanted to accomplish one thing, to have the defendant come home, not to do him harm. And she did nothing to him. No violence, no threats, nothing. That was it. She even told her mom one of the last conversations was when she got over there, if he refused to come, then she would call the police. So there's Kathy wearing the exact clothes that she changed into that she would die in. She was a big fan of coffee. The shirt she was wearing said something about coffee or die, kind of like the motto, live free or die. So there's Kathy, unsuspecting of what would happen a few short hours later. With her black t-shirt and her jean shorts and her black Under Armour flip-flops that she would be killed in. She picked up her Kate Spade bag, purse, backpack, put it over her shoulder. Interestingly enough, if you call one of the ladies, I don't recall if it was Miss Bell or Miss Jones, but they said when she pulled up and when she got out of the car that she threw her bag over her shoulder and she went up to the house, which is exactly how it appears that she carried her bag. The same bag, ladies and gentlemen, that she was holding when the defendant attacked her and stabbed her in the neck, the same bag that got blood all over it, holding her bag over her shoulder, and her keys and everything else that fell on the ground when the defendant attacked her. Does that sound like somebody, a lady who's attacking the defendant with their bag over their shoulder, holding their car keys and their charger? Of course not, because it didn't happen that way. And then this was it. You all remember when the door closed. In retrospect, it's quite eerie. The door closes. Kathy never returned to that house. That house that she kept immaculately clean. Kathy went off with her bag over her shoulder. A stocked fridge, stocked snacks, clean. Doesn't look like there's a thing out of place. Keeping a clean, safe, loving environment for Collin. Did Kathy have issues? She did. But she's a human being. You heard about her history and what she had to endure. Did that mean she should be stabbed and left to bleed out by her own son? Of course not. That's why he needs to be held responsible. So, this fancy overhead picture. What is the importance of this? Well, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the jury instructions. I'm not going to go into a bunch of jury instructions. You're going to hear those. They're very important. They're long, but I'm going to hit you with two quick things. The first degree murder and the kidnapping. I want you to look at this picture here. This is where Collin Griffith murdered his mom with premeditation and intent. This is where Collin Griffith stabbed his mom and killed her. You see the mulch. You see the entryway. You see the carport. Now you'll recall that Miss Sally Bell, the lady getting ready for church, lived right here. Nancy Jones lived here. Nancy Jones had a more obstructed view just because of the sheer angle of it. This corner here of Susan Detman's house prevented her from actually seeing what was going on. But she did see the defendant reach out, grab Kathy, and pull her in. Now, Sally Bell had a much clearer view. Sally Bell, time is important, okay? Time is important. You guys like a good timeline, and you have a pretty good timeline. Sally Bell goes to church religiously, no pun intended. She gets ready, she leaves roughly a little before 5 o'clock. Every Sunday, her and her husband get ready, they go to church. The defendant wasn't going to church on Sunday. He was getting ready to murder his mom. So Sally Bell, she sees the defendant after Kathy comes over. And is Kathy mad? Is she happy? Of course she's not happy. That doesn't mean she's being violent, and she wasn't violent. She was moving her hands. Sally made it clear. It wasn't threatening or violent or physical. She was animated, moving her hands as she was talking. She wanted her son to come home. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. So Sally saw and heard, and it was loud enough because she was inside looking out her front window. She saw the defendant grab his own mom. Remember, this isn't a stranger, which would be bad enough. He grabbed his own mom by the hair. He thinks she's an evil bitch. He wants to kill her. He's told people he's going to kill her. He's battered her and attacked her before on November 14th in Port Charlotte. And now he's just doing the same thing again. And his mom paid the price. But you know what? He's going to pay the price when you come back with a guilty verdict. He is going to pay the price because of your verdict. And he grabbed his mom by the hair, and she said, stop, you're hurting me, let go. This is his mom begging and pleading for her own son to stop pulling her hair. Who does that? He does that, and he did it. So what happens? Who's doing violence to who? I ask you that. Who is being violent to who? The mom is not being violent in any way, shape, or form to her son. She is doing nothing to him. Nothing to him. But good old Collin Griffith grabs his mom and he yanks her, he pulls her, he drags her. Who cares what verb you want to use? The point of the story is that he pulled her and dragged her into the house. She didn't have a choice because her hair was being pulled and her head and her body was being dragged into the house. Why did the defendant do that? Because he was about to unleash and quench his bloodlust for his mom. He was going to accomplish what he wanted to do for whatever it was, weeks, months, a year. And his bloodlust was going to be quenched at the price and at the cost of his mom and her dignity and her life. So why did he bring her inside? Well, it's quite clear why he brought her inside: to unleash additional violence on her. He wanted to isolate her. He didn't want witnesses to what he was about to do. Okay? That was roughly around 5 o'clock. Now, I want to tell you something. The 911 call was at 6:14, okay? That is an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to tell you something. They weren't talking or hanging out for an hour and 15 minutes. Quite the contrary. This was a powder keg that was exploding. This was a powder keg that was exploding. What was he doing for that hour and 15 minutes after he killed his mom? Connect the dots, do the math. But as soon as he pulled her inside, it was just the continuation of the beginning of the end. So for kidnapping, I'm going to start with count two. Count two, kidnapping. This is what I have to prove. 3 elements. Collin Griffith forcibly or secretly or by threat confined or abducted or imprisoned Catherine Griffith against her will. That's exactly what he did. He forcibly grabbed her by the hair and pulled her inside against her will. Did she enjoy that? Did she walk into that house voluntarily when Collin dragged her inside? When, as she said in one of the videos, when he already beat her ass on a number of occasions? No, quite the contrary. He forcibly did those things against her will. So now Kathy knows what's going to happen. Maybe she doesn't know she's about to get killed, but she knows the violence that's about to happen. Because now the defendant has her all alone with no eyes to see, no neighbors to help, and he has her all alone. He's a lot bigger than her. He's a lot stronger than her. He weighs a lot more. He's younger than her. And she was alone. Now, this is no stranger to her. She shouldn't have had to have been afraid of her own son. But now the reality is he's dragged her in by the hair. She's begging for him to let go. But does he care? No. And he amps it up even more. He yanks her and pulls her so hard that, as we recall, in the mulch here is one of her AirPods. Boom. They go inside. She would, you know what? She never came out of that house again alive. She came out dead, with no blood in her body. Thanks to Collin Griffith. This is the last time that she would enter any place. And this is the pathway to further destruction. This is literally the trail to her death at the hands and the knife of Collin Griffith. He yanked her by the hair. She didn't stand a chance. He dragged her, pulled her, get out of the source, use whatever words you want to use, and he brought her, boom, through the living room. Her other AirPod falls out. This is the violence and the force that the defendant's doing. Not only that, she loses her AirPod case. And we know where this is headed. We know the path that this is headed. That house is immaculate. Susan Detman keeps an immaculate house. That is a fact. That is evidence. Susan Detman keeps an immaculate house. Kathy Griffith, her daughter, keeps an immaculate house. There's no signs of a long fight. Kathy Griffith was in no position or no desire to fight. And the defendant had all the power, all the sick, twisted power, all the strength, all the size to his short, defenseless, unarmed mom. Does that sound like a fair fight? Or does that sound cowardly and violent? Well, that's what kept going on. There he is. That is the face of Collin Griffith after he murdered his mom. Those are the eyes that looked at his mom as he shoved that knife so deep in her neck that it literally came out the other side of her neck. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Collin Griffith. Collin Griffith dragged his mom over there. Collin Griffith, in his mind, now we're moving on. Well, I suppose before we move on to the premeditation part, I told you there were 3 elements of kidnapping. We've already hit the first one. Second one, Collin Griffith had no lawful authority to do so. Of course, he had no lawful authority to do so. You don't have lawful authority to batter somebody, to grab them by the hair against their will and yank them into a house so you can abuse them and violate them and destroy them more. Element 2 is proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And third, Collin Griffith acted with intent to inflict bodily harm upon or to terrorize Catherine Griffith, or to commit or facilitate the commission of any murder. That's a lot of words, but you'll take your time when you have the jury instructions. What did Collin Griffith do? He acted with the intent to harm Kathy Griffith, to physically destroy Kathy Griffith, to terrorize Kathy Griffith, and to kill Kathy Griffith. That third element's proved every which way possible. Because of that, ladies and gentlemen, the defendant is guilty of kidnapping. So when you deliberate and when you talk about the evidence and the law, and when you discuss amongst yourselves, and when you do the analysis, I submit to you that I have proven through the evidence that the defendant is guilty of kidnapping, but only if it could end there. Only if it could end there. Life would have gone on for Kathy Griffith. But it couldn't end there because of the defendant's conscious decisions, because of his actions. It couldn't end there. Life could have gone on, but it didn't for Catherine Griffith because of what the defendant wanted to accomplish and what he didn't stop doing until he had accomplished it. And then to figure out, dang, what do I do now? But you get to see and hear everything that happened next. So we move on to first degree murder. That, once again, these aren't abstract concepts. This is the reality. That defendant reached into the butcher block and pulled out a knife. It probably made that sound when that metal comes out of the wooden butcher block. Well, Kathy didn't have her AirPods in, so she can hear crystal clear. And that knife comes sliding out of that butcher block. And Kathy would have known at that point that what the defendant had told her, what the defendant had told law enforcement, that he would kill her and stab her, that's how it was going to end for her. So the reality is the defendant pulled the knife. Picture doesn't quite do it justice. I'm not going to stand up here and hold the knife because you're going to look at it in the privacy and solitude of the jury room, and you're going to look at that knife and you're going to see firsthand where that knife has been and who put it there. So Kathy gets stabbed in the neck with such force. You know the pathway, you know everything that happened. You heard from Dr. Garavan, who was very detailed about his expertise, how many countless stabbing cases he's worked. Never has it been an accident or somebody falling on a knife. The force that knife took, the things that it cut through, the open, gaping wound, her bleeding out to the last drop is gone. So, back on September 8th, 2024, after Kathy struggled to get up, struggled to do whatever somebody who's just about to die tries to do, knowing that their son just ensured their death. Mind you, this was at about 5 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen, because that's when Sally Bell saw the defendant yank his mom in by the hair. 5 o'clock. Yet it takes an hour and 14 minutes for the defendant to call 911. Yeah, it did. You're going to hear two clips. One is just the very intro. It establishes the time. It establishes the first words out of the defendant's mouth. Then you're going to hear the defendant's contradictory, absurd attempt at blaming Kathy Griffith for this.
He's doing a great job. Oh, look at him. He stops, he pauses, he takes a sip, and
for first-degree murder, I have to prove three things. Catherine Griffith is dead. That's an understatement. Number two, the death was caused by the criminal act of Collin Griffith. It was a homicide by Collin Griffith, stabbing his mom in the neck and watching her and letting her and being happy that she bled out and died. And three, there was a premeditated killing of Catherine Griffith. Ladies and gentlemen, when the defendant dragged her inside and dragged her to the back of the house to the kitchen, when he reached for the knife, when he pulled the knife out, think about it. Any step of the way, he could have thought to himself, you know what? This is messed up. I shouldn't be doing this. I can't be doing this. Yeah, I want to kill her, but this is my mom. You know what? Dang, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do this. He had time to reflect. But his reflection Was it Collin 1 or Collin 2? We'll get to that a little later. But his reflection was, yeah, I am going to kill, I am going to stab this evil bitch. And that's not me saying it. That's the defendant's own words. He showed his intentions by his actions and by his words and what he said he was going to do. He was going to kill that evil bitch, his own mom. And so he did. So Kathy Griffith is laid out on the floor, has taken her last breath, has bled out her last drop of blood. Catherine Griffith has been murdered by Collin Griffith. The crime is over. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Now, not to complicate things, but there's another way that I can prove first-degree murder, and I submit to you I've proved it both ways. It's my burden, of course, to prove the crimes beyond a reasonable doubt, but there's two different ways that I can prove first-degree murder. Both end with the same result, which is guilty of first-degree murder. The other way that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but it's called first-degree felony murder. I've already shown you, ladies and gentlemen, why the defendant is guilty of premeditated first-degree murder and why the defendant is guilty of kidnapping. So when you go back and deliberate and when you fill out the verdict form, while it might not be easy and nothing is ever happy about sitting on a murder trial, but you'll know that you did the right thing based upon the evidence and based upon justice. So the defendant's guilty of first-degree murder, premeditated, and kidnapping. Another way that a prosecutor can prove first-degree murder is first-degree felony murder. And I'm going to tell you this first, little insight. In order to convict the defendant of first-degree felony murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove that Collin Griffith had a premeditated design or intent to kill. When you run through the three elements, Catherine Griffith is dead. That's number one. Number two, while engaged in the commission of a kidnapping, Collin Griffith caused the death of Catherine Griffith. And three, Collin Griffith was the person who actually killed Collin Griffith. Her own flesh and blood brutalized her. We'll go to the 911 call, probably an hour or so after he had already murdered his mom.
18/14/11, 2nd September 8, 2024. 911, what's your gasoline emergency? Ambulance, what? I don't know. I don't know the secret.
Now, clip two. What I want you to notice about clip two, ladies and gentlemen, is that the 911 operator asks a very clear, simple question. Listen, what caused the bleeding? And you're going to hear and see, and you probably remember that the defendant didn't respond for many, many seconds, maybe 6 seconds. He didn't respond. And the 911 operator said more emphatically, listen, what caused the bleeding? And then the defendant gave two diametrically opposed different explanations because he wasn't going to tell the truth about what happened. And he was certainly going to try to escape from the charges and blame his mom when he is the person that murdered his own mom. So the first thing he says is, she got into a fight. What do you mean she got into a fight? Like he's trying to distance himself from what actually happened. She got into a fight and she lunged at me with a knife and she fell on it. So that's his first explanation. He's painting a picture that his mom lunged at him with a knife, tripped, and somehow fell on the knife. That's preposterous. Not being disrespectful, but that's preposterous when you think about common sense and you think about physics and when you think about reality. That just didn't happen. The evidence is to the contrary, but that's his first statement, that she lunged at him with this knife and tripped, and she somehow falls on the knife. That didn't happen. Then the 911 operator says, where is the knife right now, and who did she get in a fight with? And then the defendant says something completely different, because it's not the truth. The truth doesn't change. The truth is that the defendant stabbed his mom right in the neck, and then it ripped through and came out the other side. That's reality of what happened. And then the defendant changes his story. He thinks he's helping himself by elaborating or trying to prove to himself what happened or prove to others. And then he changes his story. Instead of her lunging at him and falling on the knife, now he says, she came at me and we got into a fight for a long time. Then she got on top of me and fell on it. Twisted it back, whatever that means.
So listen, what caused the bleeding? Listen, what caused the bleeding? She got built and she looked at me the night and she fell on it. Where is the knife right now? And who did she get in a fight with? We got to go back for a long time. Then we got to talk about it.
Collin Griffith murdered his mom, ladies and gentlemen. This is a picture of Kathy Griffith with the person that murdered her son. This is a picture of Kathy Griffith alive and smiling and happy next to the same person that she knew was going to kill her. Yet she was willing to suffer and pay the ultimate price, that was her life, at the hands of her son in order to spend a little more time with him before she left this earth. So that person, Kathy Griffith, live, full of life, smiling and happy, turned into this person. Bleeding out on her mom's kitchen floor with her good old son standing by to watch her bleed out. And there's her Kate Spade backpack purse that was over her shoulder. Once again, you saw it over her shoulder in the video. You also heard from Nancy Jones that when Kathy went up to the house, she had her bag over her shoulder. And that bag got drenched in blood as it literally spurted out of the huge gaping hole in her neck, compliments of her son. When fire rescue shows up and law enforcement shows up, they say they can literally see through her neck. They can see into the organs in her neck. And that is the end result of Collin Griffith's hatred and violence towards his mom. A gaping hole from that knife. And we saw that as she's getting stabbed, she doesn't stand a chance. She comes out of her Under Armour flip-flops. Her keys crash to the ground. Her purse crashes to the ground, falling off of her shoulder. Her charging cords fall to the ground. She struggles to get up. You can see things she's grabbing onto. And she takes her last breath, and she leaves this earth knowing that Collin Griffith, her own son, murdered her. I'll have a chance to talk to you, ladies and gentlemen, after the defenses with a much shorter wrap-up. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. And when you come back through those doors, you should come back with nothing short of pure 100% justice. And that's finding the defendant guilty as charged of both counts for what he did to his mom on September 8th, 2024.
Excellent job. Oh, why does the judge want to talk off the record? See, I just feel like there's something not right with this judge, you guys. I got a feeling. If you guys have not figured it out yet, Pants No Profit in the chat is Richard, Kathy's ex-boyfriend. Show. I would say it was her. Well, you guys weren't together when she died, were you?
Before you hear from the defense, we're going to just take a short 10-minute stretch break.
All right, please.
I'm going to show, Richard, I'm going to show this picture you sent me this morning. So we're going to take a short break. And I'll show this picture. This was at Kathy. This was at Kathy's house. Yeah, there's her watch, her Apple Watch right there. Interesting. So Richard has his own channel. He does a travel channel, and Bama's been putting it in the chat for us. And he came on this morning. We've been talking in email, and he came on this morning and shared a lot with you guys. I don't know if you caught it all, but he and I were talking about the timeline last night. Like, there's an hour between when he grabbed her by the hair and pulled her into the house and when he called 911. I think it happened right after he pulled her into the house. And then he sat there and just either, I don't know what he did, but I think he purposely let her pass and give plenty of time to pass so that by the time the ambulance got there, they couldn't resuscitate her, because he knew that if she came back, he was going down again. Barbara said, I knew he would interject. I know, right? The judge. This kid is going to reoffend if he ever gets out again. It doesn't have to be a family member. It could just be someone, whoever's close enough to him, whoever has authority over him. He's going to reoffend. Bama had put his, you guys were not together. Richard said they were not together at the time. Well, you had mentioned, Richard, that you called off the relationship with her because she basically chose Collin, and you didn't want to see her go down that road because you knew it was not good for her. He said, I left because we all saw what was going to happen. Yeah. A lot of, okay, Bama just put his link up in the chat. A lot of warning signs were coming up. But Kathy was adamant. I mean, she did what she could to protect herself by putting up the surveillance cameras in her house. But she just wanted to be with her son. She was a mom that wanted to be with her son. It's just horrible. True Crime Junkie says, yeah, that would have also given him time to contaminate the scene as well, trying to make it look more like it was self-defense or an accident. Good point. Very good point. Trying to hide his crime. Well, there you go, Pants. I hope I get you some subs over there this morning, if anything, huh? Exactly, name. Because okay, I don't want to get gory because it's early. But he was saying in the 911 call, he said it multiple times in the 911 call, there's no more blood coming out. See, that could have been brought up when the medical examiner talked about the autopsy. That how long would it have taken? There was a lot of things that could have been done in this trial, and just like Richard was saying with the Apple Watch, Kathy had a pacemaker that would have had a timetable. It would have had a timeline of what time did she die, and the prosecution didn't get into all that. But I really feel like that's because it was a speedy trial. Oh, okay. Thank you, Laura. Laura put up the video that Richard did about this case. That's not his normal content, but because he was so close to the case, he did put up a thing for his viewers. Oh, Richard said, wait for the mainstream media to steal that photo. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Richard. Richard, I don't know if you were looking in on our channel at all or not over the last couple of days, but we have really been trying to advocate for her. Hey, Pam, welcome in. We can clearly see the misjustice being done in this courtroom. And I think if we can see it, the jury can see it too. I hope. I just don't see Mandy, I don't see a not guilty verdict. He's got the option. The jury has the option on the jury verdict form. So it's either first degree, second degree, or manslaughter. I don't see him coming in with anything less than second degree, but I honestly think they're going to go with the first. That's just my opinion. I hope. I just feel like there's enough here that the jury is going to see through it all. So, okay, Richard, this is a question that I have for you. So she had cameras in every room, even his bedroom? Because did you hear what the judge said about that? Not in front of the jury, but he did say it which I thought was very odd. And I thought that was a little biased. I don't think he should be sharing his opinion on that. In her home. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if the cameras that were at the house, she had them in every room, because I didn't think she had them in every room. I thought she only had them like in the living room and the kitchen. Had a camera right over that hot tub too. Okay. Okay, so Joy says, this is awful. This awful judge is putting his thumb on the scale. If this smells, right? What is he calling the sidebar about? Is he pulling in, reining the prosecutor in to say, now look, don't you go much further? Or is he warning the defense? Watch yourself. I feel like he's more giving the prosecutor a slap on the hand. Prosecutor just did the best job he's done the entire trial. If your son had done what he'd done, because Collin had done what he done, because Collin had done what he did with his father, I think Kathy had every right. I mean, but Richard, the judge is not supposed to be one-sided. Right, Mandy, there's zero chance they will find him not guilty. Yeah, you know what's so sad, Richard, is that, like, everybody that's only her father's been the only one to advocate for her in this trial, and law enforcement. So I just feel like it would be good for us to do like something together after this. I don't know if you want to do it today or wait till after they read the verdict. I think you're safe today. Richard doesn't want to get called into anything, any trial, but I think you're safe today, Richard. But I would love to just kind of hear your viewpoint on a couple of things. Yeah, I don't trust this judge. Okay, I'm gonna go. Richard confirmed they have cameras in every room. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Present with both lawyers. State's counsel is present. Are we ready for the jury?
Yes, sir.
Well, at the end of the day, the judge gets the final sentencing. That's what's scary about this whole trial. Christine said the trial was so fast, my head is spinning. I know, right? I tell you what. Well, whatever's done here, hopefully in Oklahoma, it can't be done. So there you go. Richard says, me and Kathy had to stop our vacations once she had custody of the son. She used all her vacation days in Oklahoma for the next 5 days. After that incident happened, did she go up there immediately after the incident, Richard? Okay, you didn't go to the funeral either because of grandmama. Yeah, this is going to be brutal, so we should just probably warn all you guys. The prosecution is going to ding her again and make her look like a complete animal and him as an angel. So go ahead and get your teeth grit. Put your mouth guard on because you're going to be gritting your teeth. Michelle's been a member for 4 months. That was longer than that, but it's so good to have you, Miss Michelle. Thank you also for the super chat earlier, you guys. I didn't get a chance to really thank everybody.
Good morning, everyone. Sure seems like the state would like you to focus on the emotion and the drama rather than on the actual facts. You can't ignore the facts in this case. What's your job as jurors? It's to decide whether the state has proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Collin kidnapped and murdered his mother, and that her death was not excusable or justified. That's your job. We start with the presumption of innocence, as the judge will remind you again when he reads the instructions. That means that you have to believe that Collin is innocent, unless and until the state can overcome that presumption with evidence beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt. Not words that they may say, characterizations of how things might have happened, but actual facts. we can offer interpretations of how you should look at various facts. The facts also include testimony, but it is your job to decide what the facts are and what they mean, and whether the state has used those facts to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Collin is guilty of anything. So the state offered a number of witnesses. You guys have been here for over a week now, and they presented a lot of exhibits and evidence. I'm not going to go through all of the witnesses and all of the exhibits. You all took notes, and the exhibits will all be back there in the jury room with you. So you can look at any number of them. You can look at all the text messages that were admitted into evidence, even if they weren't all played on the screen. You can listen to things. You can watch the ring video. That will be up to you. Those are facts. The witnesses. In a move that you might find surprising, I'm not going to argue to you that the state's witnesses were unreliable or that you shouldn't believe them, with one exception. Most of the witnesses were pretty straightforward in answering the questions. Like I said, it's up to you to decide how to interpret what they said. But the one exception, and it might not even matter in the long run to your inquiry, your decision, because for the most part, what the witnesses told you isn't in dispute. And that one exception is Robert Wolantis. I may have seemed harsh with him when I questioned him, and I apologize for that. I wouldn't wish the death of a child on anyone ever. But Mr. Wolantis wanted you to believe that he was very close with Kathy and with Collin, and that he was close enough with Collin that Collin confided in him several months before Kathy died. So how close was Robert Wolantis with Collin and Kathy? He was not invited to Kathy's celebration of life. He didn't even know that she hadn't been buried. If you recall him going on and on about how funerals are for those left behind. And that's not to say that, it's not to say anything bad about Mr. Wolantis, but it's something you can consider in evaluating the ability of his testimony. He went on one trip with Kathy a few years ago that Susan paid for. He talked to Collin on the phone a total of 3 times, unless you believe there was this second mysterious phone that Mr. Wolantis claimed that he talked to Collin all the time on for either every week or every other week. There's no evidence of that. Susan told you about a phone that she got for Collin when Kathy had kicked him out one of the several times that she bought for him to use because he'd been kicked out without his phone. It was active for a couple of weeks. It's another thing you can consider in deciding whether you think Robert Wolantis was reliable. You also have to consider whether Robert Wolantis was trying to make himself seem more intimately connected with his daughter's life and his grandson's life, and now with Kathy's death. Remember, he was the one who called Polk County Sheriff's Office. He was not the go-to family member that the detectives wanted to speak to get information. They didn't seek him out. He reached out to them. And he reached out to them only weeks after Kathy died. Not right away, not, oh my goodness, my daughter died. I have this important information that may help in the investigation. No, it wasn't until after he watched Grady Judd's press conference that was extremely detailed in describing the wound that Kathy suffered and how she died, that Mr. Wolantis called the sheriff's office. You can consider that in determining whether you think his testimony is reliable. You can also consider the language he used in describing what Collin said to him, allegedly, about wanting to slit his mother's throat and watch the blood and life seep from her. You've heard Collin's words several times on the 911 call, on the Ring videos. That sound like something Collin would say, or a way he would describe anything that he says? Or does that sound like Mr. Wolantis putting words in Collin's mouth? All that to say, even if you believe Mr. Wolantis, which I urge you not to believe what he said, he claims Collin told him, but even if you do, that does not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Collin murdered his mother. And you have to remember that too. That's what the state has to prove to you. So dealing with that one witness, let's move on to the charges against Collin. The kidnapping. The state has to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Collin, by force, threat, or secrecy, confined, abducted, or imprisoned or isolated Kathy against her will. And at the time he supposedly did any of those things, at that time, he had the intent to commit great bodily harm or terrorize her. Okay? So what did the state present to try to convince you that there was a kidnapping? They presented the witnesses, the neighbors, Sally Bell and Nancy K. Jones. Both of them are neighbors of Susan's. You've seen the photos of where they lived. And you heard them say that Kathy was the one being aggressive right when she arrived. She whipped the car out of the driveway to pull it up against the curb or the grass. She slammed her car door. She slung her backpack over her back, and she marched up to the door and went inside. Went inside that house of her own accord. When she comes back out of the house, she's throwing things into Collin's car. And you can see in the photo of the interior of his car, there's clothes thrown in the back, and there's his computer and his phone on the front seat. And she's yelling and gesturing and stomping around. And then she goes back up to where Collin is standing in the doorway. Because remember, neither of those witnesses told you he was ever anywhere other than in the doorway. Not in the mulch where an AirPod was found, but in the doorway around the corner. So Kathy comes up to him. She's making a scene, obviously a scene that's loud enough, noticeable enough that the neighbors are looking to see what's going on. She's already drawn their notice. And as she's on the carport floor and Collin's standing in the doorway and she's still gesturing, he puts his hand, and the witnesses differ, on her neck area, on her shoulder, by her ponytail, and they said pulled her inside. Not dragged, not grabbed her by the ponytail, more like, and this is something you can decide, more like an ushering, like, oh crap, you're causing a scene, like Kathy can, seeing it in the state's own evidence. Let's bring this inside so that we don't get the wrath of the neighbors up or cause attention to be drawn even more to our argument. That's a more reasonable interpretation of those facts. It's reasonable to interpret that Collin was embarrassed by his mom and didn't want to air their dirty laundry in the carport. Now, she did say, "Let go, you're hurting me." Okay, that's a fact. That she said that is not in dispute. But you can't just accept a statement by anyone, but let alone by Kathy at face value. Okay, so she claims, "You're hurting me, let go." Does she pull away from him? Nope. Witnesses never said anything about that. Did she try and stay at the bottom of the steps where she was gesturing at him? No, the witnesses didn't say that. They said that her feet actually moved up the steps. That indicates a willingness to go inside. That's a reasonable interpretation of what those witnesses told you. Did she say, "I don't want to go back inside"? No. Did she grab onto Collin in some way to get him to let go of her? No. Did it even look like she was actually being hurt? Don't you think, isn't it reasonable that if Sally Bell or Nancy K. Jones thought that Kathy was actually being harmed in any way whatsoever, that they wouldn't have either called 911? Kay Jones would have called Susan because remember, she was house sitting. She was aware that Collin was allowed to be there, that he had arrived the day before, his car hadn't moved. So she's sort of keeping an eye on the house. If either of them thought that Kathy was actually being harmed or being forced to do something against her will, don't you think, as the good neighbors that they were, they would have alerted someone? They didn't, because Kathy's saying she was being hurt and let me go, and they don't know her. But I think you can interpret that statement from Kathy, knowing what you know about Kathy, as being just one of the many things that she claimed happened that didn't actually happen. For instance, when she said on one of her multiple phone calls to Susan or in a text to Collin, there are a lot, so I'm sorry if I don't remember exactly where it came from. She said, "I'm scared, Collin, you battered me or you hit me or you beat me before you left on Saturday." Remember the ring videos in every room in the house except the bathroom. And for the most part, she and Collin are on ring video. The state has given you some ring video. The defense has given you some additional ring video to sort of fill it out a little bit better. On none of that ring video is Collin ever touching her. So isn't it reasonable that even though she claimed Collin hit her, beat her, struck her before he left the house on September 7th, and there's no proof of that, that her saying "hurt me, let go" was just her making something else up? There's another reasonable interpretation of Kathy saying, "You're hurting me, let go." Remember, she was furious with Susan, with her mom, like furious. You heard her yell several times on the ring video at Susan. She was pissed off that Susan had let Collin come to her house, which, as you may recall, I asked several witnesses about this. And the reason I asked them about this is because I wanted it to be clear that it was permissible for Collin to be at Susan's house. It was permissible to his probation officer, who he emailed. It was permissible to the courts. You saw the pink paper that Kathy tried to make a big deal out of that said Collin may go to visit his grandmother out of county, just notify the probation officer. It was permissible under the 751 plan, the concurrent custody. There was nothing anywhere or in anyone's mind, except perhaps Kathy's, that said that Collin was not allowed to be at Susan's. Nevertheless, Kathy's pissed at her mom because Collin is at her house and hasn't come home as quickly as she demanded. Remember, she'd also made some threats to saying, your HOA hates you, and Freddie, Susan's dog, doesn't have a dog tag, and that's a violation. A violation of what? I don't know. But Kathy's mad enough at Susan at this point that who knows, maybe she was trying to get Susan in trouble with her homeowners association by causing a bigger scene than it actually was. I'm not saying that's for sure what happened. I'm giving you reasonable interpretations of Kathy's behavior. But the bottom line is that there's no evidence that Kathy did anything against her will that day. And certainly no evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that she went back into the house that she'd already been in on her own, despite Collin touching her neck, her hair, her ponytail. She was not being dragged. She was not being forced. Plus, once she's in the house, the state has one theory of what may have happened. I'm going to propose some other, I would argue, more reasonable ones. When she's inside the house, she has access to her phone, right? She has access to car keys. The doors are unlocked. You heard Susan say that the doors are kept unlocked, and then you heard Collin say on the 911 call when law enforcement first arrived and they're knocking on the door saying sheriff's office, he says, come in, the door's unlocked. There's no evidence that Kathy was kept in that house against her will. None. In fact, to the contrary, Collin would have been probably really happy if Kathy had left. No one wanted her to have come there. And knowing what you know about Kathy, don't you think it's reasonable that if she had been forced to go back inside against her will, that she wouldn't have fought tooth and nail to avoid doing what she didn't want to do? Remember, this is somebody that the state's own witness, Detective Zanoniani, said it's either her way or the highway. So, knowing what you know about Kathy, if she was being forced to do something against her will, it's reasonable she would have fought it, right? The state himself said it doesn't look like there was a long drawn-out fight throughout the house. If Kathy didn't want to be back in that house, how did her flip-flops make it all the way to the kitchen? If Kathy didn't want to be back in that house, she would have been flailing like she had been doing, talking to Collin before. And if she had been forced to go back into that house and then forced to go to the kitchen and forced not to leave, the house wouldn't have been in as pristine a condition as you saw. The plant would have been knocked over. Something would have been amiss. Didn't have any evidence from the medical examiner either to say she had any scalp wounds or anything indicating that she had been pulled by the hair. Not to mention the fact that, is it reasonable to you that Collin, despite what the prosecutor says, even though there's no evidence of how tall he is, how much he weighs, you've seen him in court, you've seen a picture of him shirtless. If you believe that Collin could have made his mother do anything physically, I don't know what else to tell you. I'm not going to be able to convince you of anything. And if you think that Collin was dragging her by the hair, as the state seems to want you to believe, throughout that house, how come her flip-flops didn't come off right at the front door? Collin didn't make Kathy do anything. Oh, but the AirPods, the one in the mulch, that proves that Collin made Kathy do something against her will. BS. No witness ever saw Collin in the mulch. They never saw him anywhere other than the doorway. But they saw Kathy march her way up from her car to the doorway. Isn't it reasonable that as she's pissed off at Collin, comes in hot and angry, that it fell out while she was just being herself? Same with the ones in the house. Once again, if Collin was ever forcing her to do anything physically against her will, and that AirPod came out because of something he did, you think she would have just been like, okay, I'm going to let you keep dragging me, instead of flailing about and, like I said, knocking something amiss in the house? No, that's not reasonable, because none of that ever happened. There was no kidnapping, period. The felony murder count, just also first-degree murder. If you were to find Collin guilty of that, that would mean you have to find beyond a reasonable doubt that he kidnapped Kathy and that during that kidnapping, he caused her death. So I've already told you all the reasons why I think the state has utterly failed to prove a kidnapping. But even if you did find that, because I don't want to presume that you're going to find anything. I'm here to make suggestions, not to tell you how to do your job, like the prosecutor was trying to do. That hour and 15 minutes between when the neighbors saw Collin usher his mother inside as she's making a scene and when he called 911 distraught, you would have to believe that Collin forced Kathy to stay in that house that entire hour and 15 minutes and was inflicting some bodily harm or terrorizing her that whole time. That's not reasonable. There was no kidnapping, and this was no felony murder. This was self-defense. So, the state wants you to believe that this was a premeditated murder. In order to do that, once again, they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Collin intended to kill her, and beyond a reasonable doubt that he was not acting in self-defense. That's what you would have to find. You heard a lot of outrage from the prosecutor in his closing statement. And this is an awful situation. But there was no outrage about how Kathy had behaved, how Kathy had treated her son, how she had treated other people. And I'm not saying you have to have outrage at that. You've heard a lot of unfavorable things about Kathy. And I am not going to go through every single one because you took notes, you heard and saw, you heard from the state's own witnesses, those things. Susan.
No, from you, from your testimony.
But remember, the incidents that you heard about Kathy being violent in the past or making things up in the past were all corroborated, either by police reports, DCF reports that Detective Zanoniani had reviewed, or by witnesses, by Susan. I was not presenting those to you to just bash Kathy, look like a horrible person. To the contrary, I was doing my job because the law says, and the judge will tell you, that you have to consider prior acts of violence, prior acts of aggression, a reputation for dangerous and violent behavior in deciding whether Collin was reasonable in defending himself against his mom on September 8th. I'm not going to read the instruction in detail because, like I said, the judge will do that for you. But the law requires you to consider what Collin knew about his mom to decide whether you think he acted reasonably in defending himself. You have to decide the reasonableness of Collin's actions in light of all of those things. In light of the fact that she had pulled a gun on him before, in light of the fact that she had threatened to kill other people before, in light of the fact that she had attacked other people before with weapons. Some of these things in front of Collin. So it's not even just hearing about it, it's witnessing it. He knew all those things about her. He knew what she was capable of when she was angry. He knew all of this, and it was in his mind when she came to him on September 8th. Collin also knew that Kathy would sometimes make things up to hurt other people, such as he knew that she claimed someone strangled her. She even claimed that she had video of it, but when the police reviewed it, it showed you she was strangling herself. He knew that she had called DCF on her own brother, got them involved in an investigation that was baseless. He knew that his mom claimed to do everybody else's schoolwork, including her own mother's dissertation for her PhD. He knew this about his mother. And luckily, those threats and made-up stories that Kathy had told in the past didn't ever result in any serious consequences for those people. But Kathy had never suffered the consequences of making those stories up either. And what happens when you don't suffer consequences? You continue the behavior. And sometimes she was actually even believed when she made things up. One glaring example. The day that she pulled the gun on Collin, threatened to shoot him or herself, and then handed him the gun and said, "Just shoot me," Collin immediately tells his teacher or professor, who talks to the school resource officer, who gets the deputies involved. The deputies go to Kathy at her house, and Kathy says, "No, I never pulled a gun." "What? He's just being a brat. He was failing classes, so I disciplined him by taking away his phone and his AirPods." And they believed her. Okay. Now, at the time, maybe that wasn't so astonishing. But remember what Susan told you. Susan told you that Kathy admitted to her that she had actually pulled a gun on Collin. So Kathy lied to the police. She also lied about him failing his classes. That was never true. And convinced them that Collin was just being a brat. Despite the fact that Collin had given a detailed account of what his mother did to him with her gun, they didn't believe him. They believed that he was just being a brat. Don't get me wrong, Collin could be a brat. I am not trying to make him look like an angel and Kathy look like the devil. You heard him on the Ring video and how he talked to his mom. Disrespectful, absolutely. But that doesn't make him a murderer. Also, look at his role model. That sounds awful, but we all talked about in jury selection that kids kind of do what they know. Their parents are their role models. Their parents teach them by not only talking to them, but by their own behavior. They cussed back and forth at each other. Is it an ideal parental-child relationship? No, but that's how they existed. You heard Kathy cussing at a number of people, including her mom, and cussing and claiming Collin had put a lid on her cup too tight and that it caused her to cut her hand. Did you see a cut on that video? Did you see her trying to stop any bleeding? No. Another example of her making things up. So even though Collin could be a brat and disrespectful to his mom, but what 17-year-old isn't at times, you cannot ignore the fact that Kathy told her mom, yeah, I lied to the police. I actually did pull a gun. You cannot ignore that fact. And it was in response to his mother pulling a gun on him that Collin started making these statements that the state has conveniently termed threats, but without wanting you to consider all of the words in those statements. And that was the same incident where Kathy lied to the police about not pulling a gun on Collin. Remember, he ends up Baker acted because he begins the litany of times that he said, I don't feel safe with my mom. I'm afraid what she'll do to me. I'm afraid if she pulls a gun on me again, I'll have to defend myself. If she does those things that we now know she did, I will defend myself. You even saw him on body-worn camera footage telling the officers that if she does this to me again, if she punches me, if she attacks me, I will defend myself. I'm afraid I don't feel safe at home. But no one would listen. Over and over and over, he tells people in authority this. They believe Kathy, they don't believe him. I want to propose a possible reason why they didn't listen to him. Once they found out that he had been arrested for a shooting death in Oklahoma, despite the fact that he was never charged with that, everybody decided, we can't believe him. We have to believe her. Look at his past. And that is an awful shame, because there are facts and evidence to show you how Kathy behaved. You have her own words to her mother that she pulled a gun on her own son. People in authority ignored Kathy's well-documented history of violence towards others. They ignored her well-documented history of aggression and volatility and impulsivity. They ignored the fact that she owned a gun. They ignored the things she had done to her ex-husband. They ignored that she had stabbed him and burned him and pinned him to the house. This is all in police reports and DCF reports. They just ignored it. And these are just the documented episodes that we know about of Kathy being violent towards others. You saw how she acted on her own Ring video, right? And this is her knowing she's being recorded. So if that's how she behaves when she knows she's being recorded, think about what she might do when she's not being recorded. We also know she beat Collin with a belt in front of her own mother. And when Susan tried to intervene, she tried to claim that law enforcement had sanctioned that behavior. She claimed that Corporal Rentis told her it was okay. Well, you heard from Detective Zanoniani that law enforcement would never sanction such a thing.
She has a
day
broken record.
before Kathy died. You've seen the ring video. You saw that she and Collin had an argument about putting up the bookshelf. You saw that he was disrespectful to her, but you also saw that her reaction to that was to kick him out, which she lied about later too. She claims on the phone with her mom on the ring video, I never kicked him out. I never kicked him out. I never kicked him out. Watch the ring video again. Listen to her words. Get out and don't come back, even if you're bawling your eyes out. Beyond that, give me your house keys. She took his keys to get back into the house that he lived in. You can't see it in the state's ring video that they played, but I admitted a defense exhibit that we only played a short clip from, but it's longer. You can watch it if you don't trust me or don't believe me. But in that clip that you didn't see, but is in evidence, it shows the view from the living room. And it shows her actually taking the keys from Collin and putting them on the hook inside the door. And then her closing the door and locking it behind him. And you may also remember that the key ring that was on the kitchen at Susan's house was just a car key with no house keys on it. Yeah, those were to Collin's car. No house keys. So she kicks him out over him not helping with the bookshelf. Should he have helped her? Probably. But was it so unreasonable to think that if you put up a bookshelf that's not anchored to studs, that it might be a problem? So all of this is going to Collin's state of mind the day before Kathy comes to him at Susan's house. It's something you must consider when you're deciding whether the state has proved with facts and evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that Collin wasn't reasonably defending himself against his mother on September 8th. And would a reasonable person defend themselves like Collin did? Sort of on a separate note, the state has argued that the text that Kathy sent to Collin, threatening all sorts of things, because you know she threatened all sorts of things that were not true, right? Won't go through all of them. But that this text where she says she's going to send all these ring videos of him supposedly confessing to planning a murder in Oklahoma, that provides a motive for Collin to want to kill his mom. Okay, first of all, you have to believe that the threat was true. Given what you know about Kathy, given the fact that no one's seen any ring videos of any such nature, and given the fact that Collin has never been charged with anything in Oklahoma, and given the fact that her deadline of 3 p.m. when she was going to supposedly send these to all these people had long passed before she got to Collin, isn't it reasonable to think this is just another thing that she made up? Because if those things existed, they'd be out there. They would have been in front of you. And don't you think Collin knew that that was an empty threat? Knew that no such recordings existed? So this big motive that the state wants you to believe in, also BS. Just another one of her delusional lies. Something else she made up, like she made up things all the time, and that the state's own evidence proves to you. then you have to think, even if you believe that the threat was true or real beyond a reasonable doubt, you have to believe that Collin somehow made her come to him so that he could kill her. And that's just absurd. Kathy made the choice to go to where he was. And let's face it, Collin had been trying to escape his mother for quite some time, for at least a year that we know of, since September of 2023, when he got put in the Baker Act facility for something his mom did and lied about, when he said, "I don't feel safe." And that's what he was trying to do on September 8th when she kicked him out. I mean, on September 7th when she kicked him out. He was trying to escape her. Think about this. All the times that you've heard about Collin saying, "I don't feel safe. If my mom attacks me, I'll defend myself. If she comes at me, if she pulls a gun on me, if she punches me, I'll defend myself." Remember, Collin told people that he would rather be in the Baker Act facility than at home with his mother. He told people in authority he would rather be in jail than at home with his mother. He told people in authority he would rather be in foster care than at home with his mother. And the state wants you to believe that Collin's just a brat who didn't like the discipline he got, so he murdered his mom. That's also absurd. Because as the state has pointed out many times, Collin had what they think is a great life with mom, right? So he gets to go on trips, absolutely got to go on trips. He lives in a clean, nice, organized home with plenty of food. Yes. He has a phone, he has an Xbox, he has a computer, he gets to go to college. Don't you think Collin, as smart as he was to be able to graduate early, would know that if he actually were to be placed in the Baker Act facility instead of going home with his mom where he didn't feel safe, or remain in jail instead of going home with his mom with whom he didn't feel safe, or went into foster care instead of going home with his mom with whom he didn't feel safe, he would get none of those wonderful things. None of them. He would not have a phone. He would not have an Xbox. He would not go on trips all over the country or the world. And yet he still said, "Please re-Baker Act me. Please don't send me home from jail with my mom. Please, I'd rather go to foster care." These are the things you know, and that the state has proved. Collin was trying to escape his mom because he was scared. He was scared of what she would do to him, and if she attacked him, what he would do in response. So, knowing all that, let's talk about September 8th. Kathy went to where Collin was. Isn't it reasonable to believe, because let's be clear, the state has offered no proof, zero proof of what actually happened in Susan's house on September 8th? None. Zero proof does not equal proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But isn't it reasonable to believe that Kathy, in her anger, her desperation to make Collin come home, that she picked up a knife and threatened him with it, which is in total conformance with how she's acted in the past? Absolutely, it's reasonable. The state wants you to think, despite any proof, that Collin dragged his mother to the kitchen, somehow kept her there against her will, either by beating her or holding her by the ponytail, and then somehow managed to get a knife out of the butcher block while still holding on to Kathy, such that she couldn't get away, to start this fight over the knife. That's absurd. And it certainly hasn't been proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Isn't it more reasonable, given everything you know, that Kathy picked up the knife, threatened Collin with it, and he defended himself, as he's been saying he would do for a year? Isn't it also reasonable that Kathy knew what the outcome was going to be when she picked up a knife and threatened Collin with it? You've heard of suicide by cop? Isn't it reasonable to think that Kathy committed suicide by son? She had never been able to
No, she
successfully
didn't.
commit suicide before,
Oh my God.
despite her many attempts. Isn't it reasonable that she pulled a knife on Collin, knowing that if she attacked him, that he would defend himself, and that the end result might be that she died?
Okay, you need to sit down.
I'm not saying that that's what was in her mind, because we don't know what was in her mind. I'm saying that it's a reasonable possibility given everything you know about her. It's also a reasonable possibility, a reasonable interpretation, that she attacked Collin with the knife. He has wounds.
Mm-mm-mm.
Dr. Garavan talked to you a little bit about mutual combat and how a struggle over a weapon can result in both people with wounds, which is what you see here. Exactly what you see here. You also, most of you in jury selection mentioned that self-defense is a right that each of us has. And those of you who own guns said that they keep them nearby, often for protection. And I said, protection from what? You said, if someone comes into my house and attacks me, I can protect myself and my family. So isn't it reasonable that that's what Collin did here? When Kathy came into the house where he was living, for all intents and purposes at that point, and that she attacked him with a knife, that he defended himself, as was his right? The state has proved at no level, let alone beyond a reasonable doubt, that Collin picked up the knife and attacked Kathy with it. That means you have to try and figure out, if there's no evidence of exactly what happened, you have to think about what was reasonable. And it makes way more sense, given what you know, that Kathy attacked Collin and he defended himself. They've tried to get you to believe that Collin was rage-filled and hate-filled, and all of these malicious thoughts were geared towards his mom. If you believe that beyond a reasonable doubt, don't you think there'd be more than just one wound on Kathy? Sorry, she had two wounds. She had the neck wound and she had the hand wound. Those could have happened at the same time.
Back of the neck.
You don't know whose hands were on what part of the knife during this struggle. If Collin was so rage-filled and had such hatred for his mom, don't you expect that there would be 5, 10, 20 stab wounds? That's something you can consider too. So the state played parts of the 911 call again for you, and they want you to believe that that proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Collin murdered his mother and wasn't just defending himself. You can believe or disbelieve what Collin said. If you don't believe what Collin said, that still doesn't mean that the state has proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he murdered his mother. Remember that. Also consider that Collin said there was a long fight and she fell on the knife. Knowing his history, don't you think of not being believed by people in authority repeatedly, that yeah, he may have not told the entire truth because he was scared. That doesn't make him a murderer. Especially because when he went to the people who are supposed to protect him, law enforcement, doctors, DCF, and said, my mom attacked me with a gun. My mom pulled a gun on me. I don't feel safe. I'm afraid. I'll defend myself. Don't you think and then believing her when she says absolutely never happened, he's just being a brat. Don't you think he might be a little scared when he's talking to a 911 operator? Not to mention the possible shock because of what he had been through in a struggle over a knife with his own mom. And let's not forget the one wound to Kathy's neck. State wants you to believe that it was some vicious, forceful, rage-filled wound. But remember what Dr. Garavan said? He said that it actually doesn't take much force to go through the soft tissue in the neck. The biggest point of resistance is the skin itself. And that resistance is even less if the knife has a pointy triangular tip, which is what we have here. So, knowing that it wouldn't take much force to inflict that wound, knowing that Kathy has been violent in the past, knowing that she has threatened people in the past, knowing that she has attacked other people, isn't it reasonable that she pulled the knife on Collin, he defended himself, and there was a long fight over the knife? The messiness of that confined space between the island and the cabinet and the stove supports that there was a struggle over a knife. And don't you think it's reasonable that during a struggle over a knife in that confined area, and who knows what positions anybody was in, state sure can't prove any, that gravity may have played a part in that little bit of force that was necessary to cause that wound? As I said, these are interpretations based on what you do know. But don't forget, I don't have to prove exactly what happened. It's the state's responsibility to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Collin did not act in self-defense. So let's talk about what the state may have proved beyond a reasonable doubt. One, by way of stipulation from us, that there was no foreign DNA under Kathy's fingernails. Okay, that's something you have to accept as true. What weight to give it is up to you. But so what does that mean? That means she never scratched Collin with her fingernails. That's it. Or at least not on the fingernails that they took the swabs from. So why is that important, or why should you consider that? Well, you would expect she would have scratched him with her fingernails if she was actually being dragged into the house or across the living room into the kitchen and being held against her will. No DNA, no scratches. That means no struggle with just her fingernails. So that piece of evidence does not establish anything beyond a reasonable doubt as far as whether Collin is guilty. You know why else she wouldn't have to scratch him at all? Is if she had control of the knife. Because she doesn't need to scratch him and defend herself with her fingernails because she had the knife first. That actually supports that she pulled the knife on Collin first. They've also proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Kathy had bruises all over her body. Okay. Keep in mind that the lighting in the morgue, when pictures are being taken for evidentiary purposes, are a lot different than pictures you take with your cell phone. There has been zero proof of how Kathy got those bruises. Dr. Garavan can't date them. He said they could have come from innocuous activities like doing chores around the house, like you saw Kathy doing on the night of the 7th. Certainly no evidence to show that Collin somehow inflicted those. So even though they've proved that there are bruises, they have not proved how those bruises occurred. So essentially meaningless. Or another possibility, reasonable interpretation, is that she got bruises while they were struggling over the knife. The state has also proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Collin had blood on him. So what? He had wounds. He performed life-saving CPR on his mother at the instruction of the 911 operator. He held towels in his own shirt to her to try and stop the bleeding. You saw the bloody towels. It also supports that there was a struggle over the knife. It does not support that Collin murdered his mother. The blood on his eyeglasses frame, I hope that was clear when I was asking the crime scene tech that if somebody's holding towels and doing CPR and in this confined space, that they might adjust their glasses and get blood on it that way. But what about the blood on the backpack? Does that prove Collin's a murderer? Absolutely not. Remember I asked the question about the Collin's phone being in the car and that Kathy's phone could have been in her backpack and that it was Kathy's phone that was used to call 911. So blood being on the backpack doesn't prove Collin's a murderer either. It may prove that Collin, after he tried to stem the bleeding before he called 911, had to go look for the phone to call 911. Or that in their struggle over the knife, before he called 911 in that confined space, that's how the blood got on him. The other thing that the state has proved beyond a reasonable doubt is that Collin has said over and over and over and over and over and over, I don't feel safe with my mom. I'm afraid she'll attack me. I'm afraid she'll hurt me and I'll have to defend myself. They've tried to skew the statements to make it sound like he just walks around going, I'm going to kill my mother, not if she does something to me first. So I want you to think about this. If Collin really wanted to kill his mother and that he wasn't acting in self-defense, why on earth would he have telegraphed this to every person in authority at any chance he got? He told people in authority that if she attacked him, he would defend himself because he was scared. He was scared of what she would do, much like Susan said she was scared of what Kathy would do. You can also consider that if he, for months, if not longer, wanted to just kill his mom, and this is a little sick, but there were a number of ways he could have done it that would not have implicated himself, especially after he has told people in authority, if she attacks me, I'm going to defend myself and I might kill her. One of the many cruises they went on could have pushed her off the cruise ship, could have slipped some of her medication, legal or otherwise, into one of her many drinks, could have shot her. If he was as forcefully strong over Kathy as the state wants you to believe he was, he could have forced her into the bathroom in their own home where there were no ring cameras and slit her wrists in the bathtub. And in any of those scenarios, he wouldn't have had to rely on her coming to him, her driving hours to get to him. He didn't want to kill her. You heard him on the body-worn camera footage. I don't want to kill her, but if she attacks me, I will defend myself. The state has proved nothing of significance beyond a reasonable doubt to you, except that Collin and his mom had a very disturbed relationship. And also perhaps that they never should have been living together. You heard about other family members who were periodically estranged from Kathy. These were all adults with their own lives. Collin, who also clearly wanted to separate himself from his mother, was still without the agency or the autonomy to really sever any connection with her, right? He's telling people, I don't feel safe. I don't want to go back with my mom. And yet they kept making him do that. It's kind of like someone saying, say, a zoo worker or a circus worker that's responsible for taking care of a lion in a cage. Don't make me go back in that cage with that lion. It's bared its fangs at me. It's reared up at me. But luckily, every time I was able to get out before it attacked me and caused me harm. And the zookeepers and the circus people kept saying, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. Go back in the cage. Go back in the cage. And closing the door behind him. Doesn't mean that the lion is in attack mode all the time. The lion could be majestic and charming to audiences and cute even sometimes. Could seem calm, like you'd want to pet it.
She's lost the jury already.
It was, after all, a violent being. And just because the poor zoo or circus worker was forced to go back into that cage time and time again, when the lion finally managed to attack him and he couldn't get out, you can't blame the person who was forced into that cage over and over and over for defending himself. Each one of the authority figures that Collin begged to take him away from his mother ignored him, failed to protect him. They had the power to make the if part of Collin's statements that he might harm his mom not come true. And they didn't. So, been through a lot. Gonna give you one final thought. Remember again that Collin is presumed innocent. Okay? Unless and until the state can prove beyond a reasonable doubt with evidence and facts that he kidnapped and murdered his mother. So that's like saying you have to start with seeing the vase in black. That's the presumption of innocence. In order for the state to overcome that presumption of innocence, they have to provide you with facts such that you can only see the faces, such that you don't see the vase anymore. If you can see both the faces and the vase, that's reasonable doubt. The state has in no way come close to proving to you beyond a reasonable doubt that only the faces exist. They have failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Collin did anything other than defend himself against his mother, and that what he was afraid would happen actually happened. Your verdict has to be not guilty. Thank you.
And take a break.
Recess. I think you need to finish making your lunch selections, because we'll hear from the state in rebuttal, and then I'll go directly into the instructions. So we'll take 10 minutes.
All right, please.
Richard, you got to come up, Richard, today. Once they go into deliberations, we got to talk. I want to know what you keep saying about look into mom and dad, or grandma and grandpa. Of course, she finishes her discussion after I fixed myself a peanut butter sandwich. I mean,
We'll be in a 10-minute recess.
Bama was timing it. How long was that, Bama? Did she use her full hour and a half? We appreciate your insight, Richard, regardless. I could put the link up on a stream if you wanted to come up, Richard. If you don't, I totally understand, my friend. I appreciate you being here. The victim blaming is beyond. I've never in my life. Hang on, I'm going through the chat real quick. Hour 15. Oh, an hour and 15. Patty, I thought you were trying to be funny and saying 15 hours. She was on there, up there for an hour and 15 minutes. Myron was getting, his mouth, he couldn't hold back the cuss words anymore. So your mom is the reason that you end up breaking off with Kathy, Richard, because she saw the signs in Collin and said, this is a dangerous situation. I know the jurors' eyes are glazed over. Isn't that horrible? At some point, you got to feel like, this is how long is this going to? I feel like if you're on the jury, you're like, well, okay, so the defense attorney is doing her job, right? But I think they lost a lot of respect. If they had any respect for the defense attorney, they lost it when she said that one thing about self-harm via son. That was just, So so basically, in any way, shape, or form, this was Kathy's fault, even though Collin did the deed. He's a sociopath, you guys. Listen to this right here, the way he talks to the sheriff.
Situation, I don't think.
You called who?
Rentis, Detective Rentis.
Okay.
The deputies then questioned Collin about statements he made at the jail.
Did you make any statements saying that you were going to kill your mom if you got in a car with her?
No, sir.
I'm trying to figure out why we would have a corporal at the jail that took you out, that dropped you off with your mom and telling us that you said, don't put me in a car with her, I'm going to kill her.
Yeah.
Was that said?
I did not say I was going to kill her. I did not say kill. I don't know why he sent me back here. I asked him not to, but he said he didn't like my attitude and that I had to just work on it. And he sent me back here. But his word's not mine.
Okay. Well, we're just trying to figure out. We just want to make sure we do everything we can to prevent anything happening.
Sir, given the situation, I don't think that we should be in the same house at all. I don't think it's okay. I mean, we're going to court anyways at 1. God knows what's going to happen then.
How are you getting to court?
By car.
You drive? How old are you?
Yeah, but I have to have an adult in the car with me.
You got a learner's permit?
Yeah. She's been trying to lure a confession out of me all day. It's been, well, it's not all day, but...
So you heard Collin Griffith tell the officers that his mother had been trying to lure a confession out of him all day. The deputies continue to question Collin about why he and his mom argue, and he tells them his mom had once pulled a gun on him.
So what does this all start over? Has this been ongoing forever, or is this all of a sudden happened last night?
For a long time. So I came to live with her after my dad died, and since then, there's just been kind of times when things boil over with her. And she acts out. One time she put a gun on me. I called the cops. I guess I wouldn't believe.
What got her to the point that she's doing these things?
I don't know.
You have no idea. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, she pulls a gun or hit you?
It's because that I'm driving her crazy somehow with the way that I act, and I don't know how I'm acting badly. She talks about school a lot. My grades are fine. I got a 3.7 GPA.
Okay. I mean, obviously you're not, you're smart enough kid. I get that or whatever, but I mean, obviously it takes two to create this type of environment in this situation, right? And I've heard nothing. You haven't said a word about what's going on, what you're doing, or what is going on to provoke this, or where it's coming from, other than out of the blue, your mom flies off the handle and does this stuff. I'm struggling with that a little bit.
She claims that because I don't help around the house, don't seem to follow rules. A big thing for her is that I don't make a schedule. I don't schedule my day. She has ADHD and a lot of other stuff. She was really abused by my dad, from what I know, and that kind of just made it to where she has these very specific things that set her off, these triggers.
Now remember, the entire reason Collin is in Florida at this point is because he killed his dad in Oklahoma on Valentine's Day in 2023, and Collin's mother took him to Florida to live with her. The deputies asked Collin about his father's death.
So how long ago was your dad back? Sorry to hear that.
7 months.
7 months?
Yeah. He attacked me, my dad, and when he did, he tried to kill me overnight, and it was in Oklahoma, and he died. So,
How was that?
I shot him when he tried to kill me.
Did you already have a gun in your hand? Or did you go get one?
I was fleeing, and the house was filled with guns, 23 to be exact, and...
you knew who they were?
I didn't seek one out, I was just trying to run, but when I was cornered and I had nothing else, there was a gun, and just kind of what happened.
Why was he trying to kill you?
He's also a bit of a case, but homophobia. If you believe that, and a bit of other stuff.
Okay.
The deputies decide Collin needs to be removed from the home again. They cuff him and take him to the cruiser. His court date is coming up in a matter of hours. Then his mother speaks with him at the cruiser.
Did you tell them at the jail that you were going to kill me? Did you say you were going to hurt me?
I said I was worried about
Okay. I heard you say you were worried what was going to happen.
Ma'am.
Yes.
They have to go. Well, they ended up Baker acting him twice. back to back. Then in February, when he was released again, he kept going back to his grandmother's house. Now, his grandmother had two houses. Well, she had a house in Key West where she stayed at most of the time. Then she had this other house south of Sarasota that she also stayed in. Well, he would go over there to get away from his mom and stay there. And when mom got mad and said, no, you can't be over there by yourself, you need to be here, he would get angry and they would fight. And I didn't mean to play that on so long. Sorry about that. Okay. I can't, here's my problem with I am trying to look up mom and dad right now. But here's my problem. Is it Monroe County? I found one thing, but it was a civil suit. Hang on. Let me look it up again. How do you spell Willantis, you guys? Does anybody know? I got to look back on my notes. I don't know if I spelled it right. Because you're talking about the first father. You're talking about Kathy's father. Was the one I need to look up.
All right, we're back on the record. Mr. Griffith is present with both lawyers. Mr. Levine is here for the state. Are we ready for the jury?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
I don't have them on mute. I don't know. They've got it on mute, you guys. It's not me. Richard's saying it's stuff you can't Google. Well, I'm trying to look up in the clerk of court's website. But the problem is that I need to narrow it down to a county, and Monroe County has nothing on them. And I'm just not getting anything anywhere. I'll have to do this when we're not on stream. Are they waiting on the jury, I guess?
Please be seated. Mr. Levine, rebuttal.
Thank you, Judge. Ladies and gentlemen, you're about 6 minutes away from hearing the jury instructions. It's going to be a lot shorter than the first time around. And we're going to finish up with the rest of the PowerPoint. Those two photos there, as you heard Dr. Garavan say, are consistent with defensive wounds. Open, gaping, fresh defensive wounds. Kathy doing what she could with her bare hand to try to prevent that knife from going through her neck. Remember, the defendant, his hands were pristine. No cuts, no bruises, no stab wounds, nothing. Because Kathy never had that knife. So how did this happy, smiling young lady turn into those last photographs you saw?
A couple of quick yes or no questions I almost forgot before we go. And do you think he's capable of killing you?
Yes.
She was quite aware that he was capable of killing her.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for your time.
Now, how did the defendant act when his mom did something as simple as take away his Xbox and his phone to try to instill some discipline action?
You stood up and said, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Yes, you did. I was there.
I was saying, no, I'm not a psychopath. I'm not this murderer.
Why does she think he's a psychopath and a murderer? Sometimes when you protest too much, you're scared of the reality.
I'll say it to you like this, if you want to know. Collin 1 is, I guess, he's who just wants to survive, help people, and do good things in the world. And Collin 2 is the one that protects Collin 1 in situations where he can't escape from. And Collin 2 is the one that killed someone. Because what's it going to come down to next time?
I don't think you're a pussy. I think that you are capable of killing your mother, but I don't think that you will.
No, why would I?
I will let you get to that. Do you think Collin will let you get to that? I can't hear you, sir. Why, Collin? You're strong and individual. Why would you submit in a roundabout way to Collin? When we talk about,
It's the strongest version of me.
Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant knows the strongest version of him is the one that kills and murders.
So how is the situation with you and Mom right now? Things calm down?
No,
you guys everybody get along? Where are we at?
No, sir, it's not good. She thinks that I get shit out of her. I don't. She thinks that I'm like psychotic, like literally psychopath, sociopath, something like that. I don't know exactly where she's at. She thinks I'm gonna kill her.
She's 100% on the money.
Okay, what about you doing something to her? Are you able to control yourself?
I'm in a constant state of fight or flight, and I don't know. If I think she's gonna do something, even if she's not, I might act.
Oh, he acted all right. This is what the defendant said to his own grandpa, Robert Wallantis, whose daughter was brutalized by the defendant. My grandson was very aggravated at his grandmother and his mother. He said, I am so tired of these two bitches. I'm disgusted. He said, my mom, I keep thinking over and over, I want to slit her throat. I want her to bleed out. I want to smell the blood. I want to feel the blood. I want to feel the life and the blood leaving her body. And that's exactly what he did. And that's just not Robert Wolantis saying that. When you look back at the text message that Kathy sent to the defendant before she came over, she said to her son, my dad is sending me his recordings of you telling him how you planned my murder back in February. So that just corroborates what you should already know, that Robert told his daughter what was coming her way. And what was coming her way was exactly what the defendant said he wanted to do with her. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what he wanted to do as he left his mom with that gaping hole, just as he said he would. So the talk is done. Now it's time for action. When you go back in that jury room and deliberate, come back, dispense justice in the utmost way. Thank you.
All right, members of the jury, thank you for your attention during the trial. Please pay attention to the instructions you're about to receive. Now, if you've been taking notes, you're welcome to continue doing so. But before you make that decision, be advised you will receive a written version of these instructions. Collin Griffith, the defendant in this case, has been accused of the crimes of first-degree murder and kidnapping. Murder in the first degree includes the lesser crimes of murder in the second degree and manslaughter, all of which are unlawful. However, a killing that was excusable or that was committed by the justifiable use of deadly force is lawful. If you find that Catherine Griffith was killed by Collin Griffith, you will then consider the circumstances surrounding the killing in deciding if the killing was first-degree murder or was second-degree murder or manslaughter, or whether the killing was excusable or resulted from the justifiable use of deadly force. The killing of a human being is justifiable homicide and lawful if necessarily done while resisting an attempt to murder or commit a felony upon the defendant, or to commit a felony in any dwelling house in which the defendant was at the time of the killing. The killing of a human being is excusable and therefore lawful under any one of the following three circumstances. 1, when the killing is committed by accident and misfortune in doing any lawful act by lawful means with usual ordinary caution and without any unlawful intent. Or 2, when the killing occurs by accident and misfortune in the heat of passion upon any sudden and sufficient provocation. Or 3, when the killing is committed by accident and misfortune resulting from a sudden combat, if a dangerous weapon is not used and the killing is not done in a cruel and unusual manner. A dangerous weapon is any object that will likely cause death or great bodily harm if used in the ordinary and usual manner contemplated by its design and construction. Great bodily harm means great, as distinguished from slight, trivial, minor, or moderate harm, and as such does not include mere bruises. I will now instruct you on the circumstances that must be proved before Collin Griffith may be found guilty of first-degree murder or any lesser included crime. There are two ways a person may commit first-degree murder. One is known as first-degree premeditated murder, and the other is known as first-degree felony murder. To prove the crime of first-degree premeditated murder, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that Catherine Griffith is dead. Second, that the death was caused by the criminal act of Collin Griffith. And third, that there was a premeditated killing of Catherine Griffith. An act includes a series of related actions arising from and performed pursuant to a single design or purpose. Killing with premeditation is killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. However, the period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. The question of premeditation is a question of fact to be determined by you from the evidence. It will be sufficient proof of premeditation if the circumstances of the killing and the conduct of the accused convince you beyond a reasonable doubt of the existence of premeditation at the time of the killing. To prove the crime of first-degree felony murder, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that Catherine Griffith is dead. Second, that while engaged in the commission of kidnapping, Collin Griffith caused the death of Catherine Griffith. And third, that Collin Griffith was the person who actually killed Catherine Griffith. In order to convict the defendant of first-degree felony murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove that Collin Griffith had a premeditated design or intent to kill. To prove the crime of kidnapping, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that Collin Griffith forcibly, secretly, or by threat confined, abducted, or imprisoned Catherine Griffith against her will. Second, that Collin Griffith had no lawful authority to do so. And third, that Collin Griffith acted with intent to inflict bodily harm upon or to terrorize Catherine Griffith, or commit or facilitate the commission of any murder. In order to be kidnapping, the confinement, abduction, or imprisonment, A, must not be slight, inconsequential, or merely incidental to the murder. B, must not be of the kind inherent in the nature of the murder. And C, must have some significance independent of the murder, in that it makes the murder substantially easier of commission or substantially lessens the risk of detection. Secretly means the defendant intended to isolate or insulate Catherine Griffith from meaningful contact or meaningful communication with the public. Now, in considering the evidence, you should consider the possibility that although the evidence may not convince you that the defendant committed the main crimes of which he's been accused, there may be evidence of other acts that would constitute a lesser included crime or crimes. Therefore, if you decide that the main accusation has not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, you will next need to decide if the defendant is guilty of any lesser included crime. The lesser crimes indicated in the definition of first-degree murder, as I've said, are second-degree murder and manslaughter. The lesser crime indicated in the definition of kidnapping is false imprisonment. To prove the crime of second-degree murder, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that Catherine Griffith is dead. Second, that the death was caused by the criminal act of Collin Griffith. And third, that there was an unlawful killing of Catherine Griffith by an act imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind without regard for human life. Again, an act includes a series of related actions arising from and performed pursuant to a single design or purpose. An act is imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind if it is an act or series of acts that, one, a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another, and two, is done from ill will, hatred, spite, or an evil intent, and three, is of such a nature that the act itself indicates an indifference to human life. In order to convict of second-degree murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove Collin Griffith had an intent to cause death. To prove the crime of manslaughter as a lesser-included crime in count one, the state must prove the following two elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that Catherine Griffith is dead. And second, that Collin Griffith intentionally committed an act or acts that caused the death of Catherine Griffith. Now, every person has a duty to act reasonably toward others. If there is a violation of that duty without any conscious intention to harm, that violation is called negligence. Collin Griffith cannot be guilty of manslaughter by committing a merely negligent act, or if the killing was either justifiable or excusable homicide, as I have previously instructed you. In order to convict of manslaughter by act, it is not necessary for the state to prove that Collin Griffith had an intent to cause death, only an intent to commit an act that was not merely negligent, justified, or excusable, and which caused death. To prove the crime of false imprisonment as a lesser-included offense in count two, the state must prove the following two elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that Collin Griffith forcibly, secretly, or by threat confined, abducted, imprisoned, or restrained Catherine Griffith against her will. And second, that Collin Griffith had no lawful authority to do so. Again, secretly means Collin Griffith intended to isolate or insulate Catherine Griffith from meaningful contact or meaningful communication with the public. It is a defense to the crime of first-degree murder and all of the lesser-included crimes of first-degree murder if the actions of Collin Griffith constituted the justifiable use of deadly force. Deadly force means force likely to cause death or great bodily harm. Again, great bodily harm means great, as distinguished from slight, trivial, minor, or moderate harm. Collin Griffith does not have the burden of proving that he was justified in using deadly force. Instead, for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was not justified in using deadly force. The law on justifiable use of deadly force is as follows. Collin Griffith was justified in using deadly force if he reasonably believed that such force was necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to himself. Collin Griffith had no duty to retreat before using deadly force. If Collin Griffith was in a residence in which he had a right to be, he had no duty to retreat and had the right to stand his ground and use force, including deadly force, if he reasonably believed that such conduct was necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to himself. The use of deadly force is justifiable if Collin Griffith reasonably believed that the force was necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to himself while resisting any attempt to murder him or commit an aggravated battery or aggravated assault upon him. In deciding whether Collin Griffith was justified in the use of deadly force, you must consider the circumstances at the time the force was used. The danger need not have been actual. However, to justify the use of deadly force, the appearance of imminent danger must have been so real that the defendant actually believed the use of deadly force was necessary. Moreover, to justify the use of deadly force, a reasonably cautious and prudent person under the same circumstances would have believed the use of deadly force was necessary. Residence means a dwelling in which a person resides, either temporarily or permanently, or is visiting as an invited guest. However, the use of deadly force is not justified if you find that the defendant was attempting to commit, committing, or escaping after the commission of kidnapping. If you find that Collin Griffith, who, because of prior threats or difficulties with Catherine Griffith, had reasonable grounds to believe that he was in danger of death or great bodily harm at the hands of Catherine Griffith, you may consider this fact in determining whether the actions of Collin Griffith were those of a reasonable person. If you find that at the time of the alleged first-degree murder or any lesser-included offense, Collin Griffith knew that Catherine Griffith had committed an act or acts of violence, you may consider that fact in determining whether Collin Griffith reasonably believed it was necessary for him to use deadly force. If you find that Catherine Griffith had a reputation of being a violent and dangerous person, and that her reputation was known to Collin Griffith, you may consider this fact in determining whether the actions of Collin Griffith were those of a reasonable person in dealing with an individual of that reputation. If you find that Catherine Griffith had a reputation of being a violent and dangerous person, you may consider this fact in determining whether she was the initial aggressor. In considering the issue of self-defense, you may take into account the relative physical abilities and capacities of Collin Griffith and Catherine Griffith. Now, if you find that Collin Griffith committed second-degree murder or manslaughter, and you also find beyond a reasonable doubt that during the commission of the crime, he personally carried, displayed, used, threatened to use, or attempted to use a weapon, you should find him guilty of second-degree murder with a weapon or manslaughter with a weapon. A weapon is defined as any object readily capable of inflicting bodily harm if used in the ordinary manner contemplated by its design and construction. If you find that Collin Griffith committed second-degree murder or manslaughter, but you are not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he personally carried, displayed, used, threatened to use, or attempted to use a weapon, then you should find him guilty only of second-degree murder or manslaughter. The defendant has entered a plea of not guilty. This means you must presume or believe that the defendant is innocent. This presumption stays with the defendant as to each material allegation in the indictment through each stage of the trial unless it has been overcome by the evidence to the exclusion of and beyond a reasonable doubt. To overcome the defendant's presumption of innocence, the state has the burden of proving the crime with which the defendant is charged was committed and that the defendant is the person who committed the crime. The defendant, on the other hand, is not required to present evidence or prove anything. Whenever the words reasonable doubt are used, you must consider the following. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean proof beyond all doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Such a doubt must not influence you to return a verdict of not guilty if you have an abiding conviction of guilt. On the other hand, if, after carefully considering, comparing, and weighing all the evidence, there is not an abiding conviction of guilt, or if having a conviction, it is one which is not stable, but one which wavers and vacillates, then the charge is not proved beyond every reasonable doubt, and you must find the defendant not guilty because the doubt is reasonable. It is to the evidence introduced during the trial and to it alone that you're to look for that proof. A reasonable doubt as to the guilt of the defendant may arise from the evidence itself, a conflict in the evidence, or a lack of evidence. If you have a reasonable doubt, you should find the defendant not guilty. If you have no reasonable doubt, you should find the defendant guilty. It is up to you, as the jury, to decide what evidence is reliable. You should use your common sense in deciding which is the best evidence and which evidence should not be relied upon in considering your verdict. You may find some of the evidence not reliable or less reliable than other evidence. You should consider how the witnesses acted as well as what they said. Some other things you should consider are as follows. Did the witness seem to have an opportunity to see and know the things about which the witness testified? Did the witness seem to have an accurate memory? Was the witness honest and straightforward in answering the attorney's questions? Did the witness have some interest in how the case should be decided? Did the witness's testimony agree with the other testimony and other evidence in the case? Did the witness at some other time make a statement that is inconsistent with the testimony he or she gave in court? Now, the fact that a witness is employed in law enforcement does not mean that his or her testimony deserves more or less consideration than that of any other witness. Also, expert witnesses are like other witnesses, with one exception. The law permits an expert witness to give his or her opinion. However, an expert's opinion is reliable only when given on a subject about which you believe him or her to be an expert. Like any other witness, a juror may believe or disbelieve all or any part of an expert witness's testimony. It is entirely proper for a lawyer to speak with a witness about what testimony a witness would give if called to the courtroom or discussing his or her testimony with a lawyer. You may rely upon your own conclusions about the credibility of any witness. As I've said, a juror may believe or disbelieve all or any part of the evidence or the testimony of any witness. The Constitution requires the state to prove its accusations against the defendant. It is not necessary for the defendant to disprove anything. nor is the defendant required to prove his innocence. It is up to the state to prove guilt by evidence. The defendant exercised a fundamental right by choosing not to become a witness in this case. You must not view this as an admission of guilt, nor be influenced by his decision in any way. No juror should ever be concerned that the defendant did or did not take the witness stand to give testimony in the case. A statement claimed to have been made by the defendant outside of court has been placed before you. Such a statement should always be considered with caution and weighed with great care to make certain that it was freely and voluntarily made. If you conclude that the defendant made the statement, you must also determine from the evidence whether the defendant's statement was freely and voluntarily made. In making this determination, you should consider the total circumstances, including, but not limited to, whether, when the defendant made the statement, he had been threatened to get him to make the statement, and whether anyone had promised him anything to get him to make the statement. If you conclude the defendant made the out-of-court statement, but that it was not freely and voluntarily made, you should disregard it. The following are some general rules that will apply to your deliberations, and you must follow these rules in order to return a lawful verdict. First, you must follow the law, as I am now spelling it out for you in deciding your verdict. If you fail to follow the law, your verdict will be a miscarriage of justice. There is no reason for failing to follow the laws in this case. All of us are depending upon you to make a wise and legal decision. This case must only be decided upon the evidence that you have heard from the testimony of the witnesses and have seen in the form of the exhibits and evidence and these instructions. This case must not be decided for or against anyone because you feel sorry for anyone or are angry at anyone. And remember, the lawyers are not on trial. Your feelings about them must not influence your decision in any way. Your duty is to determine if the defendant has been proven guilty or not in accord with the law. It is my job to determine what an appropriate sentence would be if the defendant is found guilty. Whatever verdict you render must be unanimous. That is, each juror must agree to the same verdict. And your verdict must not be influenced by feelings of prejudice, bias, or sympathy. It must be based on the evidence and the law contained in these instructions. Deciding a verdict is exclusively your job. I cannot participate in that decision in any way. Please disregard anything I may have said or done that makes you think I prefer one verdict over the other. You may find the defendant guilty as charged or guilty of such lesser included crimes as the evidence may justify, or not guilty. If you return a verdict of guilty, it should be for the highest offense on the verdict form for each count that has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. If you find that no offense has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then, of course, your verdict must be not guilty. Now, if you return a verdict of guilty to the charge of first-degree murder, it is not necessary that all of you agree the state proved first-degree premeditated murder, and it is not necessary that all of you agree the state proved first-degree felony murder. Instead, what is required is that all of you agree the state proved either first-degree premeditated murder or first-degree felony murder. Remember, the verdict must be unanimous. Each of you must agree to the same verdict. Only one verdict may be returned as to each crime charged. It must be in writing, and for your convenience, the necessary verdict form has been prepared. It is fairly straightforward, but the law requires that I show it to you, explain it, and read it into the record. And this is it. It is 2 pages long. At the top of the first page is what we call the caption. That gives you the information about where the case is pending, who is involved, and so forth. It reads, in the Circuit Court of the 10th Judicial Circuit of Florida in and for Polk County, with the case number 53-2024 CF 8410A000XX, and the division assignment underneath, F9. You'll then note the names of the parties pitted against each other. State of Florida, plaintiff versus Collin Griffith, defendant. It is entitled, not surprisingly, verdict. It then begins, and you'll notice count 1 is on page 1. We, the jury, find as follows as to the defendant in this case. As to count 1, you'll notice a parenthetical there which reads select only one. That's a simple reminder that you can only have one verdict for each count. There are 4 choices underneath marked A through D with a line out to the left. That's where you'd place your mark when you've agreed on your verdict. That can be a check, X, 4-person initials, whatever you like, so long as it's clear and singular. Those choices are A, the defendant is guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. B, the defendant is guilty of second-degree murder, a lesser included offense. C, the defendant is guilty of manslaughter, a lesser included offense. D, the defendant is not guilty. And then at the top of page 2 is count 2. As to count 2, again, the reminder to select only one. 3 choices for count 2, marked A through C. A, the defendant is guilty of kidnapping, as charged in the indictment. B, the defendant is guilty of false imprisonment, a lesser included offense. C, the defendant is not guilty. Now, if in count 1, you found the defendant guilty of either first-degree murder or second-degree murder, you'll notice this next section called special findings. And there's a question, depending on your verdict in count 1, there are 2 potential questions here. But the first question you would only answer if you found the defendant guilty of first-degree murder or second-degree murder. And that question is, 1, did the defendant actually kill Catherine Griffith? The reminder again to select only one. These findings also have to be unanimous, and the reasonable doubt standard applies as well to these findings. So, did the defendant actually kill Catherine Griffith? 2 choices, yes or no. Then the second question for count 1, and this is if you find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder or manslaughter. And that question is, during the commission of the offense, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten to use, or attempt to use a weapon? Again, select only one, yes or no. So, if you find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder, you would only answer question 1. If you find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder, you would answer both questions. If you find the defendant guilty of manslaughter, you would only answer the second question. If you find the defendant not guilty, do not answer either question. It concludes, so say we all, this blank day of February 2025, and then there's a place for the 4-person signature and underneath to print his or her name. Now, a separate crime is charged in each count of the indictment, and although they have been tried together, each crime and the evidence applicable to it must be considered separately, and a separate verdict rendered as to each. Now, a finding of guilty or not guilty as to one crime must not affect your verdict as to the other crime charged, except as I'm about to explain to you in the instruction regarding legally interlocking counts. The crime of first-degree felony murder, charged in count 1, is linked to count 2, kidnapping, and that the crime charged in count 2, kidnapping, is an element of the first-degree felony murder charged in count 1. You should first consider the evidence applicable to count 2. If you find that the crime charged in count 2, kidnapping, has not been proven beyond all reasonable doubt, you must find the defendant not guilty of first-degree felony murder in count 1. If, on the other hand, you find that the crime charged in count 2, kidnapping, has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, you must then consider the evidence applicable to first-degree felony murder charged in count 1. Now, a guilty verdict on count 2, kidnapping, does not require a guilty verdict on the charge of first-degree felony murder in count 1. You should find the defendant guilty on the charge of first-degree felony murder in count 1 only if you find all the elements of the crime, including the essential elements contained in the crime charged in count 2, kidnapping, were proven beyond a reasonable doubt. However, the alternative crime of first-degree premeditated murder in count 1 is not linked to any other count in the indictment. A finding of guilty or not guilty as to count 2 must not affect your verdict as to the first-degree premeditated murder in count 1. In just a few moments, Mr. Hertel will take you to the jury room. The first thing that you should do is select a foreperson who will preside over your deliberations, much like the chair at a meeting. It is that person's main function to see to it that your discussions are carried out in an organized fashion and to make certain that each of you has a fair opportunity to be heard. It is that person's job, as I've said, to sign and date the verdict form when you have agreed on your verdicts, and to bring the verdict form to the courtroom when deliberations have concluded. During deliberations, jurors must communicate only with one another and only when all jurors are present in the jury room. That means if someone steps into the restroom, all discussions about the case must stop until that person returns. You are not to communicate with anyone outside the jury about this case. Until you have reached a verdict, remember, you must not talk about this case in person or through the telephone, in writing, or by use of an electronic device, or by any use of electronic media. Do not contact anyone to assist you during deliberations, and know that these rules will continue to apply until you are discharged at the very end of the case. If you become aware of any violation of these instructions, or any other instruction I have given you during your service, you must tell me by giving a note to the bailiff. Now, many of you have cell phones, perhaps other types of electronic devices with you. The law does not permit those things to go to the jury room with you during deliberations. Mr. Hertel will be collecting those things from you. They will be securely stored away in an evidence closet. No one will have access to them. And they will be returned to you promptly upon your discharge. Or if your deliberations aren't concluded today, you will be given them for the overnight recess. I would ask that you put those things on silent or vibrate. I do have other business to conduct in the courtroom. It would be distracting if your cell phones are ringing over there in the closet. If you need to communicate with me during deliberations, please do that in writing by sending a note through the bailiff. Now, if at the time you send such communication you have taken a vote, please do not disclose the nature of your vote to us. That has nothing to do with any of our functions. It is your private affair. If you have questions, I will have to talk with the lawyers about your questions before I answer, if I'm able to answer. That could take some time. If you are able to continue deliberating while you await my answer, you may certainly do so. If I am able to answer a question and the answer is simple, I will very likely respond in writing on the same piece of paper that you sent to me. If that happens, please keep that piece of paper with the evidence. It must be filed in the court file at the conclusion of the case. If the answer is more complex, you may be brought back into the courtroom for some additional oral instruction. During the trial, several exhibits were received in evidence. You may examine whatever exhibits you think will assist you during your deliberations. They will all be sent back to the jury room with you when you begin to deliberate. In closing, let me remind you, it is important that you follow the law as I have just spelled it out for you in deciding your verdict. There are no other laws that apply to this case. Even if you do not like the laws that must be applied, you must use them. For centuries, we have agreed to live by the Constitution and the law. No juror has the right to violate the rules that we all share. Any objections to the instructions as orally given or any additional instructions requested by the state?
No, Your Honor.
By the defense?
No, sir.
All right. Before I identify our alternate jurors, which is my least favorite part of the trial, and send you back to deliberate, I want to know if any of you are aware of any violation or if any of you have been exposed to any information, anything that might impact your ability to continue serving fairly and impartially. If something you're supposed to make me aware of has not been brought to my attention, please raise your hand. All right. There are no hands raised. You all know your juror numbers, correct? Juror number 1981288, 1981110, and 1980802, the three ladies on the far end of the back row. You are our alternate jurors. You will not be going back to deliberate. There are a few things I would like to say to you before I discharge you. So if you would stay behind in the courtroom with us, the bailiff will make sure that some lunch is set aside for you to take with you. You're welcome to do that. So if you'd stay behind with us for just a moment, for the rest of you, we will send back the written instructions, the verdict form, and the evidence to you in just a moment. You may now retire to consider your verdict.
All rise, please. Can you bring your notepad?
Whew, that was a long verdict jury instruction, was it not? My word. My word, my word. Well, you guys, I'm not going to sit on a live stream with dead air or try to fill dead air while we wait for the verdict. I think it's going to be a while. And I think we probably ought to just come back when they have one.
Ladies, I'm not sure how you feel. Oftentimes the alternate is quite disappointed to find out they've devoted so much of their time to the system and then don't get to do really the most important job of the juror back in the jury room. Many alternates are quite relieved to find out they don't have to go through that process. Wherever you fall on that spectrum, I hope that you understand that you have performed a vital service by being here. Across the nation every day, in state and federal court, in criminal and civil cases alike, alternate jurors are selected, many times more than one, such as in this case, and more often than you might think, the alternate or alternates are called upon to take the seat of someone who is excused for one reason or the other during the case. That is especially true and happens frequently in cases covered by the media. This case has received significant media attention, national media attention, and the danger that friend or family member spouts something off about what they saw on the news that rings a bell with you, or folks just approaching you, trying to talk to you, the danger is quite real that jurors become prejudiced during the trial. So that's why we have multiple jurors. Also, the fact that it was over a week-long trial. So I want to make sure that you understand what a vital service you've performed by being here. And here's why it's important. If something had happened to those who are now back there deliberating, and I did not have an alternate or sufficient number of alternates to replace those folks, and the parties could not agree to proceed with fewer jurors than they're entitled to under the law, in this case 12, my hands would have been tied. I would have had no choice but to scrap everything, send everyone on their way, and start all over on another day. And you know just what an expensive proposition that is for everyone involved, your fellow jurors, and the community of taxpayers. So you have indeed performed a vital service. I've been telling you, you cannot talk about this case or look things up. You are completely released from both of those orders. You can talk to anybody you want to, including the people here. They can't approach you, but if you had questions or comments, you can approach them. You're welcome to stay and see what happens. Want to make sure that you get some lunch, but you are also equally free to forget about this case, refuse to talk to anyone, and be on your way. That's going to be up to you. On behalf of the all assembled here, I humbly thank you for your service. You are now discharged. Bailiff, because he's going to take you out this back door. So
I know, keep one extra. That's just stupid not to keep one extra. I mean, you put them through this. I've never understood that. I don't know what I think right now. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a break. Y'all go take a break. Let's get off this stream for a little while. I've got to go run an errand. I doubt anything will happen while I'm out running an errand. I'm looking at this as if, I don't know, you think they'd stay into past the evening to deliberate? I kind of need to go do some things, but I know we got to get this. I don't know. I did a recap video if anybody wants to watch it, though. I'm going to put it up next. Everybody thinks it's going to be a quick verdict. I don't think it's going to be that quick. I feel like they have too much to look at. I feel like there's going to be a couple of people in there that are leaning one way and need some reassurance, have more questions. You know, there's always one person that always has a lot of questions. Because to me, it's not just open and shut. The facts are horrible and the facts are shaky at the same time, with the mom being the way she was, and them saying he's innocent, he was abused. We know he wasn't abused. We know he wasn't abused. Maybe by his father, but not his mother. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and end this, and I'm going to put up this other stream with the recap in just a few minutes. So y'all sit tight if you want to hang out and watch it. Thanks for coming in, everybody.